Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where beauty means blackened teeth, where bathing without water is an art form, and where washing your hair once a year is perfectly acceptable. You're walking through the shadowy corridors of ancient Japan, where hygiene rituals would make modern sensibilities twist and turn in bewilderment. The scent of incense mingles with something earthier, something stranger, as aristocrats in silk robes glide past you with mouths dark as midnight and faces painted white as snow. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, like why certain beauty standards seem so bizarre, or how people managed personal cleanliness before showers and shampoo existed. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. Or perhaps share what strange historical practice surprises you most. Maybe you're tucked in bed in Toronto or winding down after a long day in Tokyo itself. I'd love to know. Now let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You find yourself in Heian-era Japan, somewhere around the year 950 CE, and you're attending a gathering at a nobleman's residence. Paper screens filter the afternoon light into golden strips across tatami mats. A young woman approaches, and when she smiles at you, her teeth are completely black, not stained by accident or disease, but deliberately, meticulously dyed. This is ohaguro, and it's the height of sophistication. The process of creating ohaguro begins days before application. You watch as a servant grinds iron filings in a small ceramic dish, mixing them with rice wine or vinegar. The mixture must sit, fermenting into a dark, pungent liquid that smells of rust and sour fruit. Some recipes call for tea powder, others for gallnut extracts from oak trees. The exact formula varies by household, passed down through generations like a precious secret. Historians still argue whether the practice originated in Japan or arrived from continental Asia, but by the Heian period, it's thoroughly Japanese. When application day arrives, you witness the ritual firsthand. The woman sits perfectly still as her attendant paints the black solution onto her teeth with a small brush made of soft animal hair. The liquid tastes metallic and bitter, coating the enamel in layers. One application isn't enough. The process must be repeated daily to maintain the deep, lustrous black that marks her as married, mature and wealthy. Common people can't afford the time or materials for ohaguro. Their natural white teeth instantly mark them as peasants. But why black teeth? You wonder as you observe the careful application. Several theories swirl through scholarly circles. Some say the practice began as a way to protect teeth from decay. The iron compound might have had mild antimicrobial properties. Others argue it was purely aesthetic, a way to make the face appear more refined, more oval, more ghostly pale by contrast. In a culture where white painted faces are the standard of beauty, dark teeth create a striking visual punctuation. The mouth becomes a shadowy void, mysterious and alluring. Marriage transforms a girl into an ohaguro practitioner overnight. You learn that on her wedding day, a young bride blackens her teeth for the first time, marking her transition from maiden to wife. From that day forward, she'll maintain the black coating until old age or widowhood. The ritual carries such weight that removing the black dye, returning to natural white teeth, signals tragedy. Divorce, the death of a husband, or social disgrace. The practice isn't limited to women, though they're the primary practitioners. You notice some older men, particularly those of the highest noble ranks, also sport blackened teeth. Samurai warriors occasionally adopt the practice, though it's less common in military circles where practicality trumps aesthetics. One amusing account from the period describes a warrior who forgot to blacken his teeth before an important ceremony and had to hastily apply the dye while riding his horse to the venue. Imagine the awkwardness, trying to paint your teeth black while bouncing along a dirt road. As you move through the gathering, you observe the social dynamics that ohaguro creates. Women compare the depth and evenness of each other's black teeth, judging quality the way modern people might judge a manicure. A poorly applied coating, streaky, fading to brown, or missing spots, brings whispers and sidelong glances. The woman with the darkest, most perfectly uniform black teeth gains admiration and envy in equal measure. The ingredients themselves carry symbolic weight. Iron represents strength and permanence. The tannic acid from tea or gall nuts acts as a mordant, fixing the colour. Some recipes include sake, connecting the ritual to Shinto purification ceremonies. You're watching chemistry and spirituality blend in someone's mouth, ancient science practiced without understanding the molecular reactions that make it work. Children grow up watching their mothers perform this daily ritual, knowing their own turn will come. Young girls sometimes play at ohaguro, painting their teeth with charcoal or ink in imitation, much to their parents' amusement. It's a rite of passage everyone anticipates. The day their teeth go black means they've reached adulthood, gained status, entered the world of marriage and responsibility. Centuries later, when you fast forward to the Meiji Restoration in the late 1800s, the government will actually ban ohaguro as part of Japan's modernization efforts. Western influences flood in, bringing new ideas about beauty, hygiene, and progress. Suddenly, black teeth seem barbaric, backwards, embarrassing. The practice dies within a single generation, though a few traditional holdouts maintain it in private. Today you can see ohaguro only in historical reenactments, on geisha performing traditional arts, or in museums where small ceramic jars of the black dye sit behind glass, like artifacts from an alien civilization. But tonight, you're still in the Heian period, where the lady with the blackest teeth is the most beautiful in the room. The scent of iron and vinegar lingers in the air, mingling with incense and silk. You've learned that beauty is culture-specific, that hygiene practices bend to social pressures, and that what seems strange to you is perfectly normal to everyone around you. The blackened smiles continue through the evening, dark and lovely and completely intentional. You settle into a corner of the room, observing more closely now. An elderly woman enters, her black teeth so perfectly maintained they seem to absorb light itself. She's been practicing ohaguro for perhaps 40 years, and her technique shows in every detail. When she speaks, her voice carries authority, and you notice how people defer to her. The black teeth signal not just marital status, but accumulated wisdom, years of maintaining tradition. A servant brings tea, and you watch how the ohaguro practitioners drink. They've mastered the art of sipping without disrupting the coating, though eventually the day's application will fade and require renewal. Some women reapply after every meal, others can maintain the colour for a full day with a single morning session. It depends on the quality of ingredients and the skill of application. The economic aspect of ohaguro fascinates you as you learn more. Iron filings must be procured from blacksmiths. Quality vinegar requires rice wine production. The brushes need replacing regularly. A household maintaining ohaguro for multiple women, a wife, adult daughters, perhaps a mother-in-law, spends a significant portion of its budget on the practice. It's a visible display of wealth, proof that the family can afford to invest in appearance rather than mere survival. You notice too how ohaguro affects speech patterns. Women with freshly blackened teeth sometimes speak more carefully, avoiding excessive mouth movement that might smudge the coating. This creates a soft-spoken, deliberate manner that becomes associated with feminine refinement. The practice literally shapes how women communicate, adding another layer of social control disguised as beauty. As night falls and lanterns are lit throughout the residence, the black teeth seem to glow with their own strange luminescence, or rather, they create voids in the lamplight, shadow mouths that speak and smile and sip tea. You realize you're witnessing something profound, a culture's decision that beauty lies not in the natural but in the transformed, not in revealing what biology provides, but in reshaping it according to collective imagination. The evening ends, and you carry with you the image of those black teeth, understanding now that they represent far more than a bizarre hygiene practice. They're markers of identity, statements of status, and most intriguingly, they're completely normal to everyone who practices them. Tomorrow you'll explore what else ancient Japanese people did with their bodies in the name of cleanliness, beauty, and social belonging. Morning arrives in ancient Japan, and you wake before dawn in a noble household where the day's hygiene rituals begin in near darkness. The first task isn't bathing or washing hands, it's purifying the mouth, and the methods would puzzle anyone accustomed to modern mint toothpaste and electric toothbrushes. You watch as a young attendant prepares the morning mouth cleansing materials, laying them out with the same reverence a priest might show arranging altar offerings. The primary tool is a willow twig, about the length of your finger, freshly cut that morning while dew still clings to the leaves. Willow contains natural salicylic acid, the same compound found in aspirin, giving it mild antiseptic properties that ancient people discovered through trial and error over generations. The attendant hands you the twig, and you're instructed to chew one end until it frays into soft bristles. You've just created a primitive toothbrush, and honestly, it's more sophisticated than you expected. You begin scrubbing your teeth with the willow brush, the taste bitter and woody, slightly astringent on your tongue. The fibers work between teeth, clearing away the remnants of last night's rice and fish. There's a meditative quality to the process. Standing in the pre-dawn quiet, working the willow across each tooth surface with deliberate attention. Historians still argue whether this practice originated with Buddhist monks who brought it from China or developed independently in Japan, but by the Heian period, it's standard procedure for anyone of status. Next comes the salt rinse, and you watch as the attendant dissolves coarse sea salt in warm water drawn from the well. The solution is cloudy, grey-white, smelling of ocean and minerals. You swish it around your mouth, feeling the salt sting against your gums, then spit it into a ceramic bowl placed specifically for this purpose. The salt serves multiple purposes. It kills bacteria, reduces inflammation, and in a culture without sugar-heavy diets, actually does a decent job of maintaining oral health. Some households add powdered charcoal to the salt mixture, turning it black and gritty, believing the charcoal absorbs impurities and bad breath. The really dedicated practitioners follow the salt rinse with tea, specifically green tea that's been allowed to cool to room temperature. You're handed a small cup of pale green liquid, told to swish it gently, working it between teeth before swallowing it rather than spitting. Green tea contains catechins, natural antibacterial compounds that modern science has confirmed help prevent tooth decay and gum disease. Ancient Japanese people didn't know the chemistry, but they knew tea rinsing mouths stayed healthier than mouths rinsed with water alone. What strikes you most is the timing. This entire oral hygiene ritual happens before anyone speaks a word of greeting, before breakfast, before the day officially begins. A person with an impure mouth shouldn't address others or consume food. The concept links physical cleanliness with spiritual purity in ways that blur the line between hygiene and religious observance. You're not just cleaning your teeth, you're preparing yourself to face the day as a worthy human being. The willow twig tradition extends beyond personal use. You learn that when travelling, nobles pack bundles of willow twigs the way modern people pack toothbrushes. Inns catering to wealthy travellers keep willow trees on their property, specifically for guests mourning ablutions. The type of willow matters too. Weeping willow is considered superior to other varieties. Its branch is more flexible and its antiseptic properties stronger. Some fastidious individuals insist on specific willow trees, sending servants to harvest twigs from a particular grove believed to have exceptional cleansing power. For those who can't access willow, alternatives exist in this hierarchical society. Common people use strips of hemp fibre or rough cloth rubbed across teeth. Some chew on pine needles, which provide a similar antiseptic effect along with breath-freshening resin. The poorest simply rinse with plain water and hope for the best. Your oral hygiene method instantly reveals your social class. Another way ancient Japan sorts people into visible categories. An amusing story circulates about a provincial lord who visited the imperial court without knowing the proper willow twig technique. He apparently chomped down on the entire twig like a horse with a carrot, rather than gently fraying one end. The courtiers politely said nothing to his face, but laughed about it for weeks afterward. Even something as simple as teeth cleaning becomes an opportunity for social embarrassment if you don't know the unwritten rules. You discover that some Buddhist monks take oral hygiene to extremes that would impress modern dentists. They clean their mouths after every meal, not just in the morning. They maintain sets of willow twigs in various stages of use, rotating them to ensure optimal bristle quality. Some monastic traditions include detailed instructions for mouth cleaning in their rules, how many times to scrub each tooth surface, the proper angle for the willow brush, the correct proportion of salt to water. Religion and hygiene merge completely in these practices. Women who practice ohaguro face a particular challenge with morning mouth rituals. The willow scrubbing and salt rinsing can damage the black tooth coating, requiring immediate reapplication. Some develop techniques to clean around the black dye rather than scrubbing it directly. Others simply accept that morning hygiene means reapplying ohaguro daily, the price of beauty and cleanliness both. You watch a married woman navigate this double requirement with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. The ritual also includes tongue scraping, though the tool looks nothing like modern tongue scrapers. A thin strip of bamboo, smooth and slightly curved, is drawn across the tongue surface from back to front, removing the white coating that accumulates overnight. The removed matter goes into the same bowl used for spitting the salt rinse, a grey, unappetizing mixture that servants dispose of quickly. Some believe the tongue coating contains spiritual impurities as well as physical ones, making its removal doubly important. Breath freshening extends beyond basic cleaning into an art form among the aristocracy. You observe nobles chewing on cloves imported from distant lands, each tiny dried flower bud worth a small fortune. Others prefer cinnamon bark strips or star anise pods, exotic spices that perfume the breath with complex, expensive scents. Fresh mint grows in many gardens, and people crush the leaves between their teeth before important meetings or romantic encounters. Bad breath is considered not just unpleasant but potentially offensive to the kami, the spirits inhabiting the natural world. The morning mouth ritual concludes with a final rinse of plain water, drawn fresh from the well and used to clear away all traces of salt, tea and willow residue. Only then, with mouth purified and breath fresh, Do people greet their family members and servants with proper morning salutations? The hierarchy of the household becomes visible in who completes their oral hygiene first: the master, then his wife, then children by age, then servants. Everyone waits their turn at the well, the willow supply, the salt jar. As the sun fully rises and the household comes alive with activity, you reflect on what you've witnessed. These ancient Japanese people have developed a sophisticated understanding of oral health, without microscopes or dental schools. They have created effective tools from natural materials and built social structures around their use. Do you remember how strange those blackened teeth seemed just yesterday? Now you understand they're maintained by people who care deeply about cleanliness, who start each day with meticulous attention to oral hygiene, who've made mouthwashing a spiritual practice as much as physical one. The willow twigs sit in their basket, waiting for tomorrow's dawn ritual, each one a small testament to human ingenuity and the universal desire for a clean mouth and fresh breath. The midday heat settles over the aristocratic compound, and you notice something peculiar. Nobody is bathing. Not in the way you understand bathing, at least. There are no steaming tubs being filled, no servants hauling buckets of hot water, no sounds of splashing from a bathhouse. Instead, you watch as a high-born lady prepares for what she calls her cleansing, and the process involves not a single drop of water touching her skin. Her attendants bring forth a wooden tray laden with materials that look more suited to a kitchen than a bathroom. There's rice bran in a silk pouch, several pieces of fine linen cloth, a small dish of camellia oil, and powders you can't immediately identify. Some white, some faintly pink, all fragrant with flowers and woods you'd expect in a perfume shop. The lady reclines on cushions in her private chamber, sliding screens closed for privacy, and the dry cleansing ritual begins in earnest. The attendant starts with the silk pouch of rice bran called nuka, which feels slightly rough when you touch it, like very fine sand wrapped in fabric. She rubs this pouch across the lady's arms in circular motions, and you watch as the bran absorbs oils from the skin, lifts away dead cells, and leaves behind a soft, polished surface. Rice bran contains ferulic acid and oryzanol, compounds modern science has confirmed reduce inflammation and brighten skin, but in ancient Japan people simply know it works. The process takes time, each arm receiving several minutes of patient scrubbing, the attendant's movements practiced and rhythmic. Moving to the lady's back, the attendant switches to a dry cloth, rougher than the silk pouch, and scrubs more vigorously. The lady's skin pinks under the friction, blood brought to the surface, dead cells sloughing away. This is exfoliation without water, mechanical cleansing that would make a modern dermatologist nod in approval. The cloth, you learn, is made from hemp or ramie fibre, materials rough enough to clean but soft enough not to damage skin. Servants wash these cloths regularly, but during the cleansing itself they stay completely dry. For the face, the approach softens considerably. The attendant mixes rice powder with a few drops of camellia oil in her palm, creating a paste she applies in gentle upward strokes. The lady keeps her eyes closed as the mixture covers her forehead, cheeks, nose, and chin. It sits there for several minutes while the attendant works on her neck and shoulders with the bran pouch. Then, using fresh dry cloths, she carefully wipes away the rice paste, taking with it accumulated oils, dust from the air, and the remnants of yesterday's cosmetics. The lady's face emerges looking refreshed, slightly flushed, undeniably clean. And she never went near water. Why avoid water? You ask this question mentally as you observe, and the answers reveal fascinating cultural attitudes. First, heating enough water for a full bath requires enormous amounts of fuel. wood or charcoal that must be gathered, purchased and stored. In a society where forests are carefully managed and resources are precious, wasting fuel on daily hot baths is simply impractical for most people. Even the wealthy ration their water use, saving full immersion baths for special occasions or seasonal rituals. Second, and perhaps more importantly, there's a belief that water can weaken the body if used too frequently. Medical theories imported from China suggest that excessive water exposure leaches away vital energy, making a person susceptible to illness. The skin, in this understanding, acts as a barrier that water can compromise. Dry cleansing, by contrast, strengthens the skin through friction, stimulates the body's qi, and removes impurities without the weakening effects of immersion. Historians still argue whether these beliefs originated in medical theory or practical necessity, but by the Heian period, they are deeply entrenched. The aristocratic lady you're observing might bathe in water only once a month, or even less frequently. Instead, she relies on these daily dry cleansings, and judging by her skin, smooth, clear, apparently healthy, the method works. Of course, she also changes her clothes regularly, wearing multiple layers of silk that absorb sweat and oils, each layer removed and replaced throughout the day. The clothing, not the body, bears the brunt of daily grime. You notice the attendant now applies various powders to the lady's body, dusting them on with a soft brush made from badger hair. These powders serve multiple purposes. They absorb any remaining oils, add fragrance, and create a smooth surface for the outer layers of clothing to slide against. Some powders contain ground rice, others crushed flowers, still others minerals like mica that add a subtle shimmer to the skin. One particularly expensive powder includes ground pearls, used sparingly on the décolletage for special occasions. The cost of such luxury makes you wonder if dry bathing is partly a status display. Look how elaborate my cleansing ritual, how rare my materials, how many servants I employ for this process. For those lower in the social hierarchy, dry cleansing takes simpler forms. Farmers and merchants might scrub themselves with a rough cloth and nothing else, perhaps using wood ash as an abrasive cleanser. The ash is alkaline, cutting through grease and dirt effectively, though it's harsh and dries the skin. Some use sand gathered from river beds, rubbing it over their bodies dry or mixed into a paste with a few drops of water. But never full immersion, never a proper bath in the daily routine. An amusing account from the period describes a Chinese diplomat's shock at Japanese bathing habits. Accustomed to his culture's emphasis on frequent water bathing, he reportedly found the Japanese dry cleansing methods barbaric and unhygienic. He wrote letters home describing nobles who rub themselves like horses being groomed, instead of properly washing. The Japanese in turn considered the Chinese diplomat's insistence on hot water baths to be excessive, wasteful, and probably unhealthy. Cultural superiority flows both directions across the sea. The dry cleansing ritual concludes with the application of camellia oil to the lady's hair, worked through with the fingers and then smoothed with a wooden comb. Her hair hasn't been washed. You'll learn about that elaborate process later. But this daily oiling keeps it glossy and manageable. The oil also carries fragrance from the flowers it's been infused with, so her hair releases subtle scent as she moves. Everything about her cleanliness is visible, olfactory, performed through materials rather than water. As you watch the attendants gather up the used cloths and powders, you calculate the time invested, easily an hour for a thorough dry cleansing, sometimes longer. This isn't a quick shower situation. It's a meditative, attended ritual that reinforces social structures. The lady has servants to cleanse her, and aesthetic values. Beauty requires effort and patience. The lady stands, freshly cleansed without a drop of water touching her body, and begins the process of dressing in her many layers of silk. You're starting to understand that ancient Japanese hygiene operates on completely different assumptions than modern practices. Water isn't automatically better. Cleanliness isn't about eliminating all bacteria, a concept they don't have, but about removing visible dirt, controlling odours, and presenting an aesthetically pleasing appearance. The dry cleansing achieves all these goals while conserving resources and adhering to medical theories about body energy and health. Do you remember thinking earlier how strange blackened teeth seemed? Now you're watching people avoid water while claiming to be clean, and somehow, in context, it makes perfect sense. The rice bran removes oils, the cloths exfoliate, the powders absorb and perfume, and the person emerges refreshed. Whether you're cleaner after a dry scrubbing than a wet shower is almost beside the point. In this culture at this time, this is what cleanliness looks like, and everyone agrees on the standard. You've watched daily mouth rituals and dry body cleansings, but nothing prepares you for the revelation about hair washing, specifically how rarely it happens. You're sitting in the outer chamber of a noblewoman's quarters on a day that has been marked on the household calendar for weeks, hair washing day. The last time this woman washed her hair was over a year ago, and the next washing won't occur for another year or more. Between these rare events, her hair receives daily oiling, combing, and perfuming, but actual washing with water and cleansing agents is an extraordinary occasion that requires days of preparation and ritual precision. The preparation begins 3 days before the actual washing. Servants must gather specific materials from multiple sources. Rice water saved from cooking and allowed to ferment slightly, giving it a sour smell and slippery texture. Camellia ash from branches burned at a particular temperature to create alkaline cleaning properties. Yuzu citrus fruits for their acidic rinse properties, and special combs carved from boxwood or tsuge, each tooth perfectly smooth to avoid snagging hair. The household's best copper basin, large enough to dip an entire head, is brought out from storage, polished until it gleams, and filled with water drawn from the purest available source, ideally a well that hasn't been disturbed by common use. You watch as the woman sits before a low table, her hair unbound, and falling around her like a black waterfall. Her hair reaches past her waist, possibly to her knees. You can't tell exactly because she's seated, and it's been growing untouched by scissors for her entire adult life. Cutting hair is associated with mourning or becoming a Buddhist nun, so aristocratic women grow their hair as long as biologically possible, treating each strand as precious. This makes the washing even more complex. There's simply so much hair to manage. The first attendant begins by combing through the hair systematically, starting at the ends and working upward to prevent breaking strands. This alone takes nearly an hour. The comb moves through section after section, removing any tangles that have formed despite daily maintenance. Every hair that comes loose during combing is carefully collected and saved. Hair is too valuable to discard. These collected strands will be woven into decorative cords or used to create hair switches that add volume to elaborate hairstyles. Once the combing is complete, the washing finally begins. The woman leans over the copper basin while an attendant pours the fermented rice water over her hair, working it through with her fingers. The rice water is mildly acidic and contains proteins that strengthen hair, though ancient practitioners don't know the chemistry. They simply know that hair washed in rice water becomes stronger and shinier. The smell is pungent, fermented and sour, filling the chamber with an odour that's distinctly unpleasant to your modern sensibilities, but apparently acceptable in this context. Next comes the camellia ash solution, mixed with warm water into a grey, slippery liquid. This is the actual cleanser, the lye-like substance that cuts through the year's accumulation of oils, dust and residue from daily camellia oil applications. An attendant works it through the hair in sections, massaging it into the scalp, pulling it down the length of each section repeatedly. The woman keeps her eyes tightly closed. Getting this solution in your eyes would be painful, and maintains perfect stillness despite the discomfort of bending over the basin for such an extended period. The rinsing phase is elaborate and seems endless. Basin after basin of clean water is poured over her hair, each one carrying away more of the ash solution until the water finally runs clear. Between rinsings, attendants squeeze the hair to help remove the cleanser, working from roots to tips with firm pressure. Historians still argue whether the multiple rinsings are necessary for cleanliness or ritual significance. But either way, they consume an enormous amount of water, perhaps the only time in the year when this much water is dedicated to one person's hygiene. After the cleaning and rinsing, a final treatment involves yuzu juice diluted in water, poured over the hair as a conditioning rinse. The citrus scent is bright and sharp, cutting through the lingering rice water sourness, and it leaves the hair slightly acidic, which closes the hair cuticles and adds shine. Modern science would approve of this pH balancing, though again, the ancient practitioners work from empirical observation rather than chemical understanding. Now comes the drying, and this is where you realize why hair washing happens so infrequently. It takes hours, sometimes an entire day, for hair this long and thick to dry completely. The woman moves to a sunny spot near an open screen, where she sits or lies while attendants periodically comb through her damp hair, spreading it out to catch the sun and air. In winter, when hair washing is even more rare, braziers are positioned nearby to help speed the drying, though fire is always a risk when dealing with such long, flammable material. Some women won't wash their hair at all during winter months, extending the interval to 18 months or even 2 years. During the drying period, the woman can do very little. She can't lie down properly, can't move around actively, can't wear her normal elaborate hairstyles. She exists in a liminal state, waiting for her hair to dry, and the household adjusts around her. Meals are brought to her drying location. Important decisions are postponed. If she's a person of sufficient rank, meetings might be rescheduled. Her hair washing day is everyone's concern. You learn that some women approach hair washing with genuine dread, not just because of the physical discomfort, but because of the vulnerability it creates. With hair unbound and wet, a noblewoman looks more like a peasant or a ghost. Loose hair is associated with spirits and disorder in the cultural imagination. She's temporarily removed from her social position, reduced to a state of ritual impurity until the washing is complete and her hair is dry and properly arranged again. The timing of hair washing follows various considerations: seasonal calendars, astrological charts, and practical household schedules. Spring and autumn are preferred seasons, when temperatures are moderate and drying conditions are optimal. Some families consult with monks or diviners to choose auspicious dates. Hair washing on an inauspicious day might bring bad luck, illness, or family misfortune, so the date selection carries real weight. An entertaining story circulates about a young bride who insisted on washing her hair shortly after arriving at her new husband's household, not realizing his family only performed this ritual during the 8th month of each year. Her request caused confusion and some offense. Was she suggesting their standards were insufficient? Did she think herself above their customs? The situation required delicate negotiation between families, and ultimately the bride learned to adapt to her new household's hair washing schedule, waiting 8 months for her next washing. You can imagine her discomfort. Accustomed to perhaps twice-yearly washings in her childhood home, now going longer between cleanings in the name of marital harmony. For those who can't endure the full year between washings, some alternatives exist, though they are not quite washing. A dry powder made from ground beans or rice can be worked through the hair and then combed out, absorbing some oils and refreshing the scalp. Some women have servants massage their scalps with fragrant oils believed to reduce itching and promote hair health. But these are maintenance measures, not true washing, and everyone understands the distinction. As the day wears on and the woman's hair finally dries, attendants begin the process of oiling it with fresh camellia oil and arranging it back into her customary style. Her hair is now glossier than before, strengthened by the rice protein treatment, smoothed by the citrus rinse, and ready to endure another year of daily oiling and combing before the next washing. She looks relieved to have the ordeal behind her, and you understand why. You've witnessed a ritual that consumes an entire day, requires multiple helpers, uses rare materials, and leaves the participant uncomfortable and vulnerable for hours. Do you remember those willow twig mouth cleanings that happen every single morning? They seem positively simple now compared to hair washing that happens once a year. You're beginning to appreciate how ancient hygiene practices create different rhythms, some daily, some annual, all interconnected into a system that makes sense within its own logic. The afternoon stretches long and warm, and you find yourself in the storage rooms of an aristocratic household, where the approach to keeping clothing fresh reveals yet another hygiene practice that operates without water, soap, or anything resembling modern laundry. You're watching servants prepare what they call the fragrance chest, and the method involves fire, exotic woods, and a patience that borders on obsessive. The chest itself is carved from Japanese cypress, or hinoki, chosen specifically because the wood naturally resists insects and mildew while contributing its own subtle, clean scent. The interior is divided into sections, each lined with additional aromatic wood, sandalwood in one compartment, paulownia in another, cedar in a third. But the real magic happens before any clothing touches these spaces. A servant brings forth a ceramic incense burner, elegantly shaped and perforated with small holes along its sides. Inside this burner she arranges pieces of fragrant wood, agar wood, also called ginkgo, which is hideously expensive because it only forms when certain tropical trees become infected with a specific mold. The infection causes the tree to produce aromatic resin as a defense, and this resin-saturated wood, when burned, creates one of the most prized scents in the ancient world. A piece the size of your thumbnail might cost more than a servant earns in a month. The servant lights the wood with a glowing coal, and immediately the room fills with a complex layered fragrance, sweet but not cloying, woody but not harsh, with notes that suggest honey, leather, flowers, and something indefinably precious. She doesn't let it flame. Instead, she adjusts the airflow so the wood smoulders slowly, releasing smoke in thin, graceful tendrils. This smoke is the cleaning agent, the freshening element, the entire point of this elaborate production. Now, the clothing enters the equation, layer upon layer of silk garments, underrobes, middle robes, outer robes, all in colours that would make a sunset jealous, are carefully draped over a wooden frame positioned above the incense burner. The smoke rises through the silk, penetrating the fibres, depositing microscopic particles of aromatic compounds, while the heat gently drives out any moisture that might harbour mildew or odours. The process takes hours. Some garments need repeated sessions, turned and repositioned to ensure every fold receives equal exposure to the incense smoke. You learn that this isn't just about making clothes smell nice, though that's certainly a benefit. The incense smoke has genuine antimicrobial properties. Modern analysis has confirmed that compounds in agarwood smoke inhibit bacterial growth and repel insects. Ancient people discovered this through observation. Incense-stored clothing lasted longer, resisted moth damage, and stayed fresher between wearings. The practice is hygiene and preservation combined with aesthetics and spiritual significance. Different woods create different effects, and aristocratic families develop signature scent combinations that become part of their identity. One family might favour a blend heavy on sandalwood, with hints of clove and cinnamon. Another prefers agarwood mixed with camphor and star anise. When a person from such a family enters a room, their clothing announces them before they speak. The scent trail proclaims their identity, their wealth, their taste. You can literally smell someone's social status wafting through the air. The scent competition among nobles reaches absurd heights. Kodo, or the Way of Incense, becomes an art form with formal competitions where participants attempt to identify different aromatic woods through smell alone. Judges award points for correct identifications, and winners gain social prestige. But beyond these formal contests, everyday life involves constant olfactory assessment. When two nobles meet, they're subtly evaluating each other's clothing scent. Is it expensive, complex, properly balanced? Too strong suggests nouveau riche vulgarity. Too weak implies declining fortunes or poor taste. Creating a personal scent blend is serious business requiring expertise. Some families employ specialists who do nothing but manage the household's incense program, sourcing materials, mixing blends, supervising the smoking process, and ensuring that every garment carries the proper fragrance. These specialists guard their recipes as trade secrets, passing knowledge from master to apprentice with the solemnity of a religious transmission. An exceptional incense master might be headhunted by rival families, offered substantial sums to switch allegiances and bring their olfactory expertise to a new household. The storage chests themselves become repositories of accumulated fragrance. After years of use, the wood absorbs so much aromatic smoke that it becomes a fragrance source in its own right. Even without actively burning incense, clothing stored in these aged chests emerges perfumed simply from contact with the saturated wood. Some families possess fragrance chests that have been in continuous use for generations, their interiors dark with accumulated resins, their scent profiles evolved into something unique and irreplaceable. These chests are inheritance items, passed down with the family property, sometimes valued more highly than the clothing they contain. For those who can't afford agarwood, which is essentially everyone outside the upper aristocracy, alternatives exist. Common people burn pine resin or cedar shavings to scent their clothing, creating simpler but still pleasant fragrances. Merchants might use camphor, which is more affordable and has the added benefit of being an effective insect repellent. Buddhist temples often use sandalwood, creating a distinctive religious scent that marks temple garments and anyone who spends significant time in religious spaces. Seasonal considerations affect incense choices too. Summer incense tends toward cooling scents, mint, bamboo, water-based fragrances that psychologically combat heat. Winter incense is warmer, heavier, resins, spices, woods that suggest comfort and protection from cold. Spring brings floral notes, plum blossom, cherry wisteria. Autumn means chrysanthemum maple, and the first hints of approaching winter's deeper scents. Your clothing changes its smell with the seasons, making you a walking calendar of the year's progression. The relationship between incense-scented clothing and personal body odour is complex. By modern standards, people in this era don't smell particularly fresh. They rarely bathe fully, they don't use deodorant, and they sweat under multiple layers of silk. But their clothing smells extraordinary, creating an olfactory buffer between their bodies and the world. When you encounter an aristocrat, you smell their incense-perfumed garments long before any personal odour becomes detectable. It's a form of hygiene that accepts bodily reality while masking it with something culturally superior. An amusing incident involves a provincial lord who attempted to impress the imperial court by over-incensing his clothing. He apparently used so much agarwood smoke that his garments were literally dripping with condensed resin, and when he entered the audience chamber, the overwhelming smell caused several courtiers to excuse themselves, claiming sudden illness. The emperor politely suggested that restraint in fragrance demonstrates refined sensibility, which was a diplomatic way of saying the lord smelled like he'd bathed in a perfume factory. The story circulates as a cautionary tale about excess. Even good things can be taken too far. The incense smoking process must be repeated regularly because the scent fades over time, especially in clothing that's worn frequently. A garment might be smoked every few weeks, or after particularly strenuous wear, or before important occasions. This creates a constant rotation through the fragrance chests, clothing coming out for wearing, going back for rescenting, emerging refreshed. The household's incense program never really stops. It's an ongoing maintenance system that requires planning, resources, and attention. As evening approaches and the servants carefully fold the freshly scented garments into their designated chest compartments, you stand in a room that smells like a forest temple mixed with a spice market. The complexity of the fragrance is almost overwhelming. Layers upon layers of woods and resins, each contributing to a whole that's greater than its parts. You understand now that hygiene in ancient Japan isn't just about removing dirt, it's about adding beauty, creating sensory experiences, and using natural materials in sophisticated ways that acknowledge both practical needs and aesthetic desires. Do you remember the lady who bathed without water, using rice bran and silk pouches? Her clothing has been through this incense process, and when she moves through her daily life, she carries these fragrances with her, a mobile advertisement of her household's taste and resources. The fragrance chest is where cleanliness and beauty merge, where hygiene becomes art, where smoke preserves silk and announces status in a single elegant solution. You're beginning to think you've seen the strangest aspects of ancient Japanese hygiene when someone mentions the toilet arrangements, and suddenly you're faced with practices that make everything else seem tame by comparison. You find yourself following a servant toward the household's privy, a small structure separated from the main building by a covered walkway, and what awaits inside is a far cry from modern porcelain and plumbing. The toilet itself is essentially a raised platform with a rectangular opening positioned over a removable container or pit below. There's no seat, no flush mechanism, no running water, just the opening and whatever falls through it. The room is surprisingly clean given its function, with fresh straw scattered on the floor and a small window positioned to provide ventilation. What catches your attention immediately is the collection of materials arranged on a low shelf. Wooden sticks carved flat on one end, bundles of hemp rope cut into manageable lengths, and, for wealthier households, sheets of handmade paper, a luxury that most people can't begin to afford. The wooden stick called a chugi is the most ancient option and still the most common across all social classes. You examine one closely. It's about the length of your hand, carved from bamboo or soft wood, with one end flattened into a spatula-like shape and smoothed carefully to avoid splinters. The use is exactly what you're imagining, and yes, it's reusable. After use, the stick is rinsed in a bucket of water kept specifically for this purpose, sometimes with added ash or sand as an abrasive cleanser, then left to dry for the next person. Shared toilet sticks are normal in households, inns and public facilities, a concept that makes modern germophobia seem like a recent invention. The hemp rope method is slightly more disposable but still economical. A length of rope about as thick as your thumb is pulled back and forth to achieve cleanliness, then discarded into a collection basket. The used rope doesn't go to waste. It's eventually composted or burned for fuel. Some people tie knots at intervals along the rope, creating a more effective cleaning surface, though this makes the experience rougher and less comfortable. Historians still argue whether the rope method originated in Japan or came from China, but by the medieval period, it's thoroughly established in both cultures. Paper represents the height of toilet luxury, available only to the wealthy and used sparingly even by those who can afford it. The paper isn't the soft, quilted material you know from modern bathrooms. It's rough, handmade washi, each sheet the product of hours of labour. Craftsmen create it by pulverising mulberry bark, spreading the pulp thinly and drying it on screens. Using such paper for toilet purposes seems almost sacrilegious when you consider the work involved. But the aristocracy values comfort and cleanliness enough to justify the expense. Each sheet is typically used multiple times, folded and refolded to maximise its utility before disposal. The disposal of waste itself reveals fascinating attitudes about hygiene and recycling. Human waste isn't treated as something disgusting to be hidden away and forgotten. It's valuable fertiliser, carefully collected and composted for agricultural use. Farmers pay households for their waste collection rights, creating an economic system around excrement. The best fertiliser comes from wealthy households where the diet is richer. Poor people's waste, resulting from simpler grain-based diets, is less desirable but still useful. You're witnessing a circular economy where nothing is wasted, where even the most intimate bodily functions connect to agriculture and food production. Public toilet facilities in towns and cities operate on similar principles but at larger scales. Communal privies serve multiple households, with collection pits that waste merchants empty regularly. These merchants sell the contents to farmers, and the most successful waste traders become surprisingly wealthy. There's an entire professional hierarchy around excrement. Collectors, transporters, processors who age and compost it properly, and specialists who blend different waste types to create optimal fertiliser mixtures. It's entrepreneurship applied to something modern society prefers to flush away and forget. Cleanliness after toilet use extends beyond the mechanical act of wiping. Many households keep water basins near the privy for hand washing, though soap is virtually non-existent in most contexts. Instead, people rinse their hands with water and rub them with ash or rice bran to cut through oils and provide mild abrasion. Some Buddhist monasteries insist on elaborate hand purification rituals after toilet use, with specific sequences of rinsing, rubbing with cleansing materials, and final purification rinses that border on the ceremonial. The social etiquette around toilet use is complex and unspoken, but rigidly enforced. You don't discuss your toilet activities in polite company. You don't acknowledge the sounds coming from the privy if you happen to pass by while someone is inside. You certainly don't comment on anyone's toilet stick technique or paper usage. A servant who accidentally left the privy door slightly ajar after use might face serious reprimand. Privacy around elimination is one of the few bodily functions that demands absolute discretion in a culture that's otherwise fairly open about physical processes. Gender differences emerge in toilet practices too. Women, especially aristocratic women in their many layers of silk, face particular challenges. Their clothing makes quick toilet visits nearly impossible. Multiple robes must be carefully arranged to avoid soiling, held in specific ways while maintaining modesty. Some noblewomen use portable toilet containers in their private chambers, rather than making the walk to the separate privy facility, especially at night or during illness. These containers are emptied by servants assigned specifically to this task, one of the least desirable positions in the household hierarchy. An entertaining story, well, entertaining in hindsight, tells of a court gentleman who became so ill from bad fish that he spent an entire night running between his chamber and the privy. The path was long, the night was dark, and he lacked the servants of higher-ranking nobles who might have brought him a portable container. His dignity suffered, his sleep was destroyed, and the story somehow leaked to his peers, resulting in months of subtle teasing disguised as concern for his health. The incident illustrates how even toilet troubles have social consequences when everyone lives in close quarters and gossip flows freely. Children learn toilet practices early, though training methods are remarkably simple by modern standards. Babies and toddlers go without any bottom covering in warm weather, simply eliminating wherever they happen to be, with someone cleaning up afterward. As they grow older, they learn to recognize the urge and make it to the privy in time, and they learn the proper use of toilet sticks or rope. There's no shame associated with accidents during the learning process. It's simply part of childhood, and adults accept the messiness as temporary. The seasonal aspect of toilet use brings its own challenges. Winter makes the walk to the outdoor privy genuinely unpleasant, and the wooden platform becomes painfully cold. Some households stuff the walls with extra straw for insulation, but fundamentally, winter toilet trips are endured rather than enjoyed. Summer brings different problems. Heat intensifies odours, flies multiply around the collection pits, and the general discomfort of using a privy in sweltering humidity makes the experience memorably unpleasant. Spring and autumn are the golden seasons for toilet comfort, relatively speaking. The introduction of paper as a toilet material represents a significant technological and economic shift that happens gradually over centuries. Chinese paper-making techniques arrive in Japan around the 6th century, but paper remains too valuable for toilet use until production increases and prices drop. Even then, only the wealthy can justify using paper for such purposes. The transition from universal stick usage to paper as a status symbol parallels other hygiene practices you've observed. The rich find ways to make even elimination more comfortable, while the poor stick with traditional economical methods. As you leave the privy area and return to the main household, you reflect on what you've learned. Modern people tend to think of toilet paper as a basic necessity, but for most of human history, including centuries of Japanese civilization, people manage perfectly well with reusable sticks and whatever other materials were available. The practices seem strange only because you're accustomed to different standards, but within their own context they're practical, economical, and integrated into a broader system of waste management that's arguably more sustainable than modern flush-and-forget approaches. Do you remember the elaborate incense rituals that perfumed clothing? They serve double duty now, masking any lingering odours from toilet activities while projecting beauty and status. Everything in this hygiene system connects to everything else, creating a coherent whole that addresses the realities of human bodies while maintaining social order and aesthetic standards. The morning light filters through paper screens as you enter a noblewoman's dressing chamber, and you're about to witness grooming rituals that involve removing hair from places you'd expect it and carefully maintaining it in others. The practices surrounding eyebrows, foreheads, and facial hair reveal another layer of ancient Japanese beauty standards that would perplex modern observers, and the tools involved are as specialized as everything else you've encountered. You watch as the woman sits perfectly still while an attendant prepares for the eyebrow removal ceremony. Yes, ceremony, because nothing about aristocratic grooming is casual or rushed. The attendant holds a small pair of tweezers made from folded metal, each one hand-forged and polished until it gleams. These aren't the precision tweezers of modern cosmetic counters. They're cruder, requiring more pressure to grip individual hairs, making the process slower and presumably more painful than contemporary plucking. But here's where it gets truly strange. The goal isn't to shape the eyebrows into attractive arcs or define them more clearly. The goal is to remove them entirely. The attendant works methodically, plucking each hair from the woman's brow until nothing remains but smooth skin. The woman's face remains impassive despite what must be considerable discomfort, tears forming at the corners of her eyes from the repeated tugging at sensitive follicles. This is beauty in ancient Japan, a high, hairless forehead and the complete absence of eyebrows. Once the natural eyebrows are gone, the attendant picks up a stick of charcoal or ink and draws new eyebrows high on the forehead, well above where the natural brows once grew. These painted eyebrows are called hikimayu, and they're not meant to look realistic. They're stylized marks, sometimes just thick horizontal lines, sometimes shaped like clouds or butterflies, positioned halfway between the natural brow line and the hairline. The effect is alien to modern eyes. The face looks simultaneously childlike and ancient, the high forehead elongated, the expression difficult to read without natural eyebrows to communicate emotion. Why? You find yourself asking this constantly about Japanese beauty practices. The answers combine aesthetics, status signaling, and cultural ideals about femininity. A high forehead is considered intelligent and noble, literally noble, as aristocratic families supposedly have naturally higher foreheads than commoners. By removing eyebrows and raising the painted substitutes, women artificially create this aristocratic appearance. The smooth expanse of forehead also provides more canvas for white face powder, which you've already learned is the pinnacle of beauty. Natural eyebrows interrupt the pure white surface. Better to remove them and paint controlled marks exactly where you want them. The forehead shaving extends even further. Some women shave their hairline back by an inch or more, creating an even more pronounced forehead. The attendant uses a small, wickedly sharp blade called a kamisori, drawing it carefully along the hairline while the woman holds her breath. One slip could mean a cut and subsequent scarring, visible evidence of a grooming accident that would be socially mortifying. The attendant's hand must be absolutely steady, her focus complete. This isn't a task for inexperienced servants. Senior attendants with years of practice handle the razor work. Married women take eyebrow removal even further than unmarried girls. Not only do they remove and redraw their brows, but they also shave their eyebrows completely and choose not to paint replacements at all. Combined with the black-dyed teeth you witnessed earlier, married aristocratic women present a distinctive appearance. White faces, black mouths, smooth foreheads with no eyebrows whatsoever. The look simultaneously marks their marital status and removes them from conventional attractiveness to male attention outside marriage. Historians still argue whether this was intentional, making married women less attractive to reduce adultery, or simply an extreme expression of aesthetic preferences. Men of the highest noble ranks participate in similar grooming, though less dramatically. Court officials often shave their foreheads, pushing back their hairlines to create the appearance of height and intelligence. Some remove their eyebrows as well, though this is less universal among men than women. The effect is similarly strange. A courtroom full of high-foreheaded, partially hairless men in elaborate silk robes, their faces powdered white, their expressions difficult to read without natural eyebrows signalling surprise, anger, or concern. Body hair receives equally meticulous attention, though attitudes differ from modern Western standards. Underarm hair is generally left alone. Nobody considers it unsightly or unhygienic. Leg hair similarly doesn't concern anyone since it's hidden under layers of clothing, but facial hair on women is removed immediately and obsessively. Any hint of upper lip shadow, any stray hairs on the chin or cheeks, any peach fuzz more visible than the surrounding skin, all must go through tweezing or shaving. The tools for this work are kept in beautiful lacquered boxes, organised with the same care given to tea ceremony implements. Each pair of tweezers has its designated spot, each razor its protective sheath, each pot of soothing oil or astringent wash its labelled container. The grooming kit of an aristocratic woman is a substantial collection, representing significant investment in materials and tools that must be maintained, sharpened, and replaced as needed. Pain management during these procedures is minimal by modern standards. Some women apply camellia oil before plucking or shaving, believing it makes the process easier and soothes the skin afterward. Others use cold water to numb the area slightly before work begins, but fundamentally, the pain is simply endured as part of beauty's price. A woman who flinches excessively or complains during her grooming is considered weak or overly delicate, lacking the fortitude expected of her status. The frequency of these procedures varies by how quickly hair regrows. Eyebrow area might need attention every few days to catch new growth before it becomes visible. Forehead shaving might happen weekly or bi-weekly. The constant maintenance means that grooming consumes significant time in an aristocratic woman's schedule, easily an hour or more each week dedicated purely to hair removal, not counting the time spent on other beauty practices you've already witnessed. An amusing incident involves a young bride who was so nervous about her first forehead shaving that she jerked at the crucial moment, resulting in a visible cut that took weeks to heal. Her new mother-in-law was reportedly furious, seeing the accident as evidence of poor training and weak character. The bride spent her first month of marriage feeling ashamed of the scab on her forehead, certain that everyone was judging her harshly. The story illustrates how even minor grooming accidents carry social weight in this image-conscious culture. For lower social classes, these extreme grooming practices are either simplified or abandoned entirely. A merchant's wife might tweeze her eyebrows into a more natural shape, rather than removing them completely. A farmer's wife probably leaves her eyebrows alone entirely, lacking both the time and the social incentive to spend hours on cosmetic hair removal. The amount of grooming a woman undergoes directly correlates with her social position. The more leisure time available, the more elaborate the practices. There are practical considerations too. Removing eyebrows permanently through repeated plucking over years can damage the follicles, preventing regrowth. Women who begin this practice in adolescence might find themselves genuinely unable to grow eyebrows in old age. long after they've stopped painting replacements. They're stuck with smooth brows for life, a permanent reminder of youthful beauty standards they can no longer maintain in other ways. The psychological impact of these practices is worth considering. How does it feel to look in a bronze mirror and see a face with no eyebrows, a forehead stretched unnaturally high, features you barely recognize as your own? Does the constant modification create distance from your natural appearance? Or does the modified version become your true self? These questions don't have clear answers, but they suggest that ancient beauty practices weren't just about appearing attractive. They were about transforming into something culturally constructed, moving away from natural human appearance toward an idealized aesthetic that required constant maintenance. As the grooming session concludes, and the woman examines her reflection in the polished bronze mirror, she seems satisfied with what she sees. Her forehead is smooth and high, her lack of eyebrows marking her as sophisticated and married. Her face a carefully constructed canvas ready for powder and paint. To her, this is beauty. To you, it's fascinating and strange. Another example of how thoroughly culture shapes even the most intimate aspects of physical appearance. Do you remember those blackened teeth that seemed so bizarre at first? Now you've seen eyebrow removal, forehead shaving, and the careful construction of beauty through subtraction and modification. Each practice builds on the others, creating a complete aesthetic that makes sense only when you see all the pieces together. Steam rises in thick clouds as you approach a low wooden building in a busy town district, and the sounds emanating from within, splashing water, laughter, conversation echoing off wet walls, tell you this is a communal bathhouse, one of the few places where water bathing actually happens regularly. The Sento culture you're about to witness operates on completely different principles than the private dry cleansings of aristocratic households, and the social dynamics inside these public spaces reveal class divisions, gender negotiations, and hygiene practices that scandalize some visitors while seeming perfectly normal to regular patrons. You pay a small fee at the entrance, just a few copper coins, and receive a wooden token in exchange. The affordability is intentional. Bathhouses serve working people who lack private bathing facilities, offering them access to hot water and cleanliness they couldn't achieve at home. The fuel costs alone make private hot baths prohibitively expensive for most people. But when those costs are shared among dozens or hundreds of daily visitors, bathing becomes economically feasible even for labourers and craftsmen. The entrance area divides into separate sections marked for men and women, though you quickly learn this separation isn't absolute. In many bathhouses, especially in rural areas or older establishments, mixed bathing is completely normal. Men, women and children share the same pools, the same washing areas, the same steam-filled rooms. Nudity in this context carries no sexual connotation. It's simply the practical state for bathing, no more significant than wearing clothes elsewhere. Foreign visitors, particularly Europeans who arrive in later centuries, are consistently shocked by this casual mixing of genders in states of undress. But to the Japanese bathers, the foreigner's embarrassment seems ridiculous and prudish. You follow others into the bathing area, where the process begins not with immersion but with washing. Low wooden stools are arranged in rows, each paired with a wooden bucket. Bathers sit on these stools and use the buckets to scoop water from large communal tubs, pouring it over themselves repeatedly to rinse away the day's dirt and sweat. Some scrub with hemp cloths or dried gourd sponges, working up a lather with soap made from plant ashes and camellia oil. The soap is rough, gritty with undissolved particles, nothing like the smooth bars of modern soap, but it cuts through grease and grime effectively enough. Only after this preliminary washing do bathers enter the actual hot bath, a large wooden tub or a stone-lined pool heated by a fire beneath or alongside it. The water is hot enough to make your skin tingle, approaching temperatures that seem barely tolerable. Bathers ease themselves in gradually, exclaiming at the heat, their skin flushing pink immediately. This isn't relaxation in the modern spa sense, it's borderline endurance, testing how long you can remain in water, hot enough to raise your core temperature and make you sweat even while immersed. The social etiquette of bathhouse behaviour is intricate and mostly unspoken. You don't splash excessively. You don't hog the best spots near the heat source if others are waiting. You engage in friendly conversation with strangers, but respect signals that someone wants quiet. You're careful not to contaminate the bathwater. No soap gets in the communal pool, no dirt or bodily fluids if you can possibly help it. The shared nature of the experience demands consideration and self-regulation. Conversations in the bathhouse range from mundane daily concerns to surprisingly intimate topics. The heat and nakedness seem to lower social barriers, making people more willing to discuss problems, share gossip, or seek advice. You overhear a merchant complaining about tax collectors, a craftsman worrying about his daughter's marriage prospects, two women comparing remedies for aching joints. The bathhouse functions as a social hub, a place where community bonds strengthen through shared vulnerability and physical proximity. Children treat the bathhouse as a playground, splashing and diving despite their parents' half-hearted attempts at discipline. They seem completely unbothered by the heat that makes adults grimace, their energy levels somehow increasing rather than depleting in the steamy environment. Older children help younger siblings wash, demonstrating the scrubbing technique, making sure everyone rinses thoroughly before entering the shared bath. It's an education in hygiene and social behaviour simultaneously. The gender mixing question becomes more complex as you observe different bathhouses and different regions. Some urban establishments maintain strict separation, with walls dividing men's and women's sections and separate entrance times. Others use a low partition that provides visual privacy while allowing conversation to flow between sides. Still others, particularly in rural areas or traditional neighbourhoods, maintain no separation whatsoever. Historians still argue whether the movement toward gender separation represents modernization, Western influence, or simply changing domestic values. Probably all three factors intertwine. The bathhouse workers add another dimension to the experience. Some establishments employ staff who scrub customers for an additional fee, attacking dirt and dead skin with rough cloths and surprising vigour. These professional scrubbers, often older women with arms like wrestlers, show no mercy to grime. They'll have you pink and practically glowing by the time they finish, removing layers of skin you didn't know needed removing. Other bathhouses offer massage services, with practitioners who knead sore muscles and manipulate joints with techniques passed down through generations. Temperature preferences create informal hierarchies within the bath. Those who can tolerate the hottest water gain a certain respect, their endurance admired even if nobody says so directly. New visitors who can barely stand the heat and exit after just a few minutes earn gentle mockery. They're weak or not used to proper bathing. It's a minor status game, but in a society obsessed with hierarchy and proper behaviour, even bathing becomes a way to demonstrate personal qualities. The fuel required to heat these bathhouses represents a significant environmental and economic consideration. Wood must be constantly fed to the fires. keeping the water at the desired temperature throughout operating hours. Some bathhouses burn inferior wood or agricultural waste, producing thick smoke that contributes to urban air quality problems. Others invest in better fuel and more efficient heating systems, allowing them to charge slightly higher fees while providing a better experience. The smell of wood smoke becomes inseparable from the bathhouse experience. You smell it on your skin and hair afterward, marking you as someone who recently bathed. Bathing frequency varies wildly by occupation and personal preference. Labourers who work physically demanding jobs might visit the bathhouse daily, needing to wash away sweat and grime that dry cleansing can't adequately address. Craftsmen might go every few days, merchants and shopkeepers perhaps weekly. The aristocracy, as you've learned, avoids water bathing almost entirely except for rare ritual occasions. The bathhouse is fundamentally a working class institution, which gives it a certain social stigma among the upper classes, even as it provides essential hygiene services to everyone else. An entertaining story tells of a samurai who, fallen on hard times, had to use a public bathhouse for the first time in his life. He apparently had no idea about the washing first protocol and attempted to enter the communal bath still dirty, causing outrage among the other bathers. They explained the rules with barely concealed disdain for his ignorance, and the samurai, humiliated, left without bathing. The story circulates as both comedy and social commentary. Even warriors aren't above embarrassment when they violate bathhouse etiquette. The bathhouse also serves medical and therapeutic purposes beyond basic cleanliness. People with skin conditions visit hoping the hot water will provide relief. Those with joint pain or muscle aches use the heat as treatment. Some bathhouses add medicinal herbs to their water, mugwort, citrus peels, sake, creating therapeutic baths believed to cure various ailments. Whether these additions actually help or simply make bathers feel they're getting something special for their money is debatable, but the practice persists and customers seem satisfied. Seasonal variations affect bathhouse culture significantly. Summer bathing is less popular. Who wants to sit in scalding water when it's already sweltering outside? But bathhouses adapt by lowering water temperatures and emphasizing the cooling off period afterward. Winter transforms bathhouses into essential comfort stations, places where people can warm themselves thoroughly before facing cold walks home. The contrast between the steamy interior and the frigid world outside creates a feeling of sanctuary, making winter bathhouses social centres as much as hygiene facilities. As you finally exit the bathhouse, skin pink and pores open, you feel genuinely clean in a way the dry cleansing methods couldn't achieve. Your body temperature slowly normalizes as you dress, pulling on clothes that feel different against freshly scrubbed skin. The bathhouse has provided not just physical cleanliness, but a social experience, a communal ritual that connects you to everyone else who participated. It's democratic in a way most of ancient Japanese society isn't. In the bath, naked and vulnerable, the merchant and the labourer are just bodies seeking warmth and cleanliness. Do you remember the elaborate dry cleansing rituals with rice bran and silk pouches? They serve the aristocracy well, but for working people, the bathhouse offers something those private rituals can't match: hot water, deep cleansing, and the warmth of community. Both systems work within their contexts, addressing hygiene needs while reinforcing social structures that separate classes even in how they wash. The afternoon air in an aristocratic garden carries scents you're only beginning to identify. Layered, complex, intentional fragrances that seem to emanate from the nobles themselves, rather than the flowers surrounding them. You are about to witness one of the most refined and competitive aspects of ancient Japanese culture. the art of personal scent creation, and the social judgments that follow when people evaluate each other's aromatic signatures. This isn't about masking body odour with a splash of cologne, it's about crafting an olfactory identity as distinctive and carefully curated as a family crest. You watch as a perfume master, yes, that's an actual profession, works in a private chamber surrounded by dozens of small containers holding aromatic materials from across Asia and beyond. There's agarwood from Southeast Asia, sandalwood from India, cloves from distant islands, musk from Tibet, camphor from Formosa, and countless flowers, resins, and woods you can't immediately identify. The master wears silk gloves to prevent hand oils from contaminating materials, and she works with tools that look like miniature apothecary equipment. Scales for weighing precise amounts, grinding stones for powdering ingredients, and mixing bowls made from materials that won't absorb or contribute odours. The woman commissioning this personal fragrance sits nearby, describing her preferences. She wants something that suggests autumn without being obvious, something with depth and complexity that reveals itself slowly rather than announcing its presence immediately. She mentions chrysanthemum but doesn't want literal chrysanthemum scent. She wants the feeling of chrysanthemum, the melancholy and elegance associated with that flower. The perfume master nods, understanding perfectly, and begins selecting materials that will create this abstract olfactory concept. The process is called takimono when it refers to solid incense blends, or neriko when discussing the needed perfumes that will be hidden in clothing or applied to the body. The master starts with a base of sandalwood, grinding it to powder with a mortar and pestle, the rhythmic scraping filling the room. She adds small amounts of clove, testing the ratio by grinding a tiny sample and burning it on a hot coal to check the scent. Too much clove would be overwhelming. Medicinal, just enough provides warmth and subtle spice that enhances rather than dominates. Next comes agarwood, the most expensive component, added in quantities so small they're barely visible. A few grains of this precious wood can transform an entire blend, adding complexity and depth that cheaper materials can't achieve. The master explains that different agarwood varieties produce different effects. Vietnamese agarwood has a sweet, almost fruity quality, while Indonesian varieties tend toward darker, more resinous characters. For this autumn chrysanthemum blend, she chooses a middle ground, balancing sweetness and depth. The blend requires a binding agent to hold the powdered ingredients together. The master adds honey that's been aged for 3 years, its sugars concentrated, its own scent mellowed and deepened. She kneads the mixture like bread dough, working it until every ingredient is uniformly distributed. The resulting paste will be shaped into small balls or cones, dried partially, and then stored for months before use. Fine perfume, like fine wine, improves with age as the scent components marry and mellow together. But the creation is only half the story. The social performance of scent is where things become truly fascinating. You attend what's called a kumiko or kodo gathering, a formal incense appreciation event where nobles compete to demonstrate their olfactory sophistication. Participants sit in a circle, and small amounts of different incense blends are burned one at a time on carefully heated coals. The goal isn't to identify the scents, that would be too crude, but to compose poetry inspired by each fragrance, demonstrating cultural refinement and emotional sensitivity. The first incense burns, and the container is passed clockwise. Each participant leans over it, inhaling deeply, allowing the scent to trigger memories, emotions, and literary associations. A particularly skilled player might reference a specific scene from classical literature, a line of poetry that perfectly captures the mood the scent evokes. Others judge these responses, awarding points for originality, appropriateness, and literary merit. Its competitive smelling elevated to an art form that requires years of study. Outside these formal contexts, everyday scent evaluation happens constantly and often cruelly. When two nobles meet, they're immediately assessing each other's personal fragrance. Is it expensive? Well balanced? Appropriate for the season and occasion? Does it suggest refined taste or nouveau riche excess? The judgments are rarely spoken aloud, but they influence social standing and marriage prospects, as surely as family lineage or political connections. Personal body scent, the natural smell humans produce, exists in complicated relationship with these crafted perfumes. The ideal is for personal scent to be barely detectable, overwhelmed by the intentional fragrances added through incense-smoked clothing and applied perfumes. But everyone knows that beneath the sandalwood and cloves, bodies sweat and produce odours. The key is managing this reality discreetly, never allowing natural smells to dominate, never being caught without your olfactory armour in place. Some believe that a person's natural scent reveals their inner character. Sweet body odour supposedly indicates a pure heart and good health, while sour or bitter scents suggest moral corruption or illness. These beliefs lead to obsessive self-monitoring. Do I smell acceptable underneath my perfumes? What if someone detects something unpleasant? The anxiety around personal odour becomes another form of social control, making people constantly worried about something they can't entirely manage. The economic aspects of scent culture are staggering. A noble family might spend more on aromatic materials annually than on food. The rarest ingredients cost astronomical sums. A thumb-sized piece of premium agar wood might equal a year's wages for a skilled craftsman. Families sometimes go into debt maintaining their scent programs, unable to admit they can't afford materials their status supposedly requires. It's conspicuous consumption in its most literal sense. You're displaying wealth through smell, burning money for others to experience as fragrance. Counterfeit and adulterated perfume materials create a shadow market. Unscrupulous merchants mix cheap woods with tiny amounts of real agar wood, selling the blend as pure at inflated prices. They extend expensive musk with cheaper animal fats. They create sandalwood substitutes from similar-smelling but inferior woods. Nobles who lack expertise or reliable suppliers often get cheated, ending up with mediocre scents while believing they've purchased premium materials. The embarrassment of discovering you've been using fake agar wood for months would be devastating. Seasonal scent expectations add another layer of complexity. Spring demands light, floral fragrances, plum blossom, cherry, wisteria. Summer requires cooling scents, mint, bamboo, aquatic notes. Autumn brings chrysanthemum, maple, and the first hints of heavier winter fragrances. Winter allows the richest, warmest scents, heavy resins, dense woods, spices that suggest heat and protection from cold. Wearing a summer fragrance in winter or vice versa marks you as either poor, ignorant, or deliberately rebellious, all socially problematic positions. An amusing incident involves a young man who attempted to impress a potential bride by commissioning an absurdly complex perfume with 17 different ingredients. The result was olfactory chaos. No single note emerged clearly, and the overall effect was overwhelming and unpleasant, like standing inside a perfume shop during a fire. His intended bride reportedly found excuses to avoid him at social gatherings, and the marriage negotiations quietly collapsed. The lesson circulates among young nobles. More ingredients don't make better perfume, and sophistication lies in restraint. The perfume master's role extends beyond simply mixing ingredients. She must understand her client's personalities, social positions, and aspirations. A fragrance suitable for the retired court lady would be inappropriate for a young wife. A merchant trying to elevate his family's status needs something expensive enough to signal wealth, but not so ostentatious it seems he's trying too hard. The master navigates these social considerations as carefully as she balances clove against sandalwood. Historians still argue whether Japan's perfume culture influenced or was influenced by Chinese practices. Certainly, many materials and techniques came from the continent, but Japanese perfumers developed distinctive aesthetics, subtlety over boldness, seasonal appropriateness over year-round signatures, and the integration of scent with literature and poetry in ways that seem uniquely Japanese. The art form becomes something new, even as it uses imported materials and builds on foreign knowledge. As evening approaches and the kodo gathering concludes, you walk through the garden surrounded by people who each carry their own fragrant atmosphere. The air is a symphony of sandalwood, cloves, flowers, and mysterious resins, each person contributing their note to the collective scent. You understand now that in ancient Japan, you don't just appear in society, you announce yourself through smell, craft an olfactory identity, and submit to constant evaluation based on something invisible but omnipresent. It's hygiene as performance art, cleanliness as social competition, and smell as a form of communication as complex as any language. You find yourself in a lady's chamber as morning light filters through paper screens, and an attendant is preparing materials for what seems like an oddly intimate grooming session focused entirely on hands and fingernails. The tools laid out on a lacquered tray suggest this is no casual manicure. There are strips of supple deer hide polished until they shine. Small ceramic dishes containing reddish-brown paste made from crushed balsam flowers, phials carved from dried gourd, and buffing cloths made from the finest silk. What follows reveals how even the smallest details of physical appearance carry meaning in this status-obsessed culture. The process begins with nail-length assessment, and you quickly realise that long nails are not just acceptable but actively desirable among aristocratic women. The lady whose hands are being tended has fingernails extending perhaps half an inch beyond her fingertips, curved slightly, maintained with obsessive care. These nails announce that she doesn't perform manual labour. She can't with nails this long. They are a visible declaration of leisure and privilege, proof that servants handle any task requiring functional hands while she maintains ornamental ones. The attendant starts by filing each nail into a gentle oval shape using the dried gourd file, which is surprisingly effective despite its organic origin. The filing motion is slow and methodical, always working in one direction rather than soaring back and forth, a technique that prevents splitting and maintains nail strength. Each nail receives several minutes of attention, the attendant frequently pausing to examine her work from different angles, ensuring perfect symmetry. One nail slightly longer than its neighbours would be a glaring aesthetic failure, evidence of careless grooming that reflects poorly on the entire household. Once the shaping is complete, the buffing begins. The deer hide strip, soft as butter but with just enough texture to polish, is drawn across each nail surface repeatedly. The attendant wraps the hide around her finger and rubs in circular motions, gradually building heat through friction. This mechanical polishing brings out the natural shine of the nail, making it gleam like a tiny mirror. No lacquer or coating is involved. The shine is purely the result of patient buffing, revealing the nail's true surface rather than covering it with artificial gloss. The buffing takes an astonishing amount of time. Each nail requires 10 to 15 minutes of continuous polishing to achieve the desired mirror finish. For 10 fingernails, you're watching a process that consumes more than 2 hours, and this is just one component of regular hand care. The attendant's arm must ache from the repetitive motion, but she shows no sign of fatigue or impatience. This is her job, and excellence in nail buffing is as important as excellence in any other craft. Now comes the colouring, and the method is entirely natural. No synthetic dyes, no painted lacquer, just the juice of balsam flowers crushed and mixed with alum to create a reddish-brown stain. The attendant applies this paste to each nail, coating it thickly, then wraps each finger in small pieces of silk cloth to hold the stain in place. The lady must sit with wrapped fingers for several hours while the balsam penetrates the nail, gradually tinting it. The colour won't be vivid, nothing like modern nail polish, but rather a subtle warmth, a hint of red-brown that enhances the natural nail colour rather than covering it entirely. The waiting period creates interesting challenges. With all 10 fingers wrapped and unusable, the lady can't do much of anything. She can't eat without assistance, can't write, can't even scratch an itch. Servants must attend to every need, feeding her if she's hungry, adjusting her clothing if it shifts uncomfortably, holding a book if she wants to read. This enforced helplessness is both the point and the proof. Only someone with abundant servants and leisure time can afford to spend half a day with unusable hands for the sake of slightly tinted nails. When the wrappings finally come off, the nails show a delicate peachy brown tint, warmer than their natural shade but not dramatically different. To achieve deeper colour requires repeated applications over multiple days, each session adding another layer of pigment. Some women maintain a schedule of weekly balsam treatments, building and maintaining their preferred nail colour through consistent effort. Others apply it only before special occasions, accepting natural nails as their everyday state. Nail length carries specific social meanings beyond general aristocratic status. Unmarried women of marriageable age keep their nails particularly long, advertising their availability and family wealth simultaneously. Married women may maintain moderate length or trim their nails shorter once they've secured their position through marriage. Very elderly women often grow their nails to extraordinary lengths. Some accounts describe nails curving back on themselves several inches long, requiring special care to prevent breaking. These extreme nails mark the women as retired from practical concerns, living testaments to accumulated family wealth that can support such impractical ornamentation. The nail care routine extends beyond length and colour to hand softness and suppleness. The deer hide buffing helps, but additional treatments involve regular applications of camellia oil, worked into the hands and especially around the cuticles. Some women sleep with their hands wrapped in silk gloves after oil application, letting the treatment penetrate overnight. Others use rice bran paste, the same material used for body cleansing, as a hand scrub to remove dead skin and maintain smoothness. Calluses are absolutely unacceptable on aristocratic hands. Any hint of roughness, any thickened skin that suggests manual work must be eliminated immediately through filing and moisturizing. Women inspect each other's hands with critical eyes, noting any imperfection that might suggest declining fortunes or improper behaviour. A lady caught with calloused hands would face serious social consequences, rumours that her family can no longer afford adequate servants, speculation that she's performing manual labour out of necessity, questions about her suitability for continued inclusion in elite circles. Men participate in nail culture too, though with different standards. Scholars and officials maintain moderately long nails on certain fingers, traditionally the pinky and ring fingers, while keeping others shorter for practical purposes like holding brushes for writing or calligraphy. Warriors generally keep all nails short for obvious reasons. Long nails interfere with weapon handling and are vulnerable to breaking during combat. But even warriors might grow their nails slightly longer during peacetime, signalling their temporary distance from military activity. An entertaining story tells of a court official who accidentally broke his carefully maintained thumbnail the day before an important ceremony. He was so distraught that he commissioned a fake nail made from thin bone, coloured to match his other nails and attached with pine resin adhesive. The fake held throughout the ceremony, but afterward, when he tried to remove it, the adhesive refused to release, and he had to soak his thumb in warm oil for hours. His colleagues found the situation hilarious, though they admitted they'd probably do the same thing faced with similar nail emergency. The economic aspects of nail care parallel other beauty practices you've observed. It's another avenue for displaying wealth through purchased materials and servants' labour. The balsam flowers must be gathered at the right season and processed immediately to preserve their staining properties. The deer hide comes from specific tanning processes that produce the proper texture for buffing. The silk wrapping cloths are disposable, used once and discarded. All these materials cost money, and the servant time devoted to nail care could be employed elsewhere. Families that maintain elaborate nail care programs are visibly wealthy, their ladies' hands announcing economic status with every gesture. Seasonal variations affect nail care routines too. Winter is challenging. Cold weather makes nails brittle and prone to breaking, requiring extra oil treatments and careful handling. Summer heat can make the balsam stain fade more quickly, necessitating more frequent applications to maintain colour. Spring and autumn are ideal nail seasons, when moderate temperatures and humidity levels make nails strong and receptive to treatments. The psychological investment in perfect nails seems excessive until you consider what they represent. These aren't just fingernails. They're symbols of femininity, status, and proper behaviour. A woman with perfect nails has demonstrated patience, access to resources, and adherence to beauty standards that separate her from common women. Her nails prove she belongs in elite society, that her family maintains proper standards, that she herself embodies the aesthetic values her culture prizes. As the nail care session concludes and the lady admires her buffed, subtly tinted nails in a bronze mirror, you see satisfaction in her expression. She's invested hours in this process, endured discomfort and inconvenience, and emerged with hands that meet her culture's exacting standards. Tomorrow she'll oil them again. In a week she'll rebuff them. In a month she might reapply the balsam stain. The maintenance never ends. But then, beauty in ancient Japan is never a finished state. It's a continuous process, a daily commitment, a visible demonstration of values that place aesthetics above convenience. Do you remember the eyebrows being plucked away entirely? Now you've seen fingernails transformed into status symbols through hours of patient labour. Every body part becomes a canvas for cultural meaning, every grooming practice another opportunity to display belonging or reveal inadequacy. You're walking through a coastal village when you notice something that stops you completely. Women moving in a peculiar way, their steps small and shuffling, their balance seeming precarious as they navigate uneven ground. At first you assume they're injured or elderly, but then you see younger women moving identically, and you begin to understand that something deliberate is happening with their feet. This isn't quite foot binding in the Chinese sense, but Japan has developed its own practices around foot restriction and modification, particularly among certain occupations and regions. And what you're about to learn reveals yet another way ancient cultures reshape bodies to fit aesthetic and social ideals. The practice you're observing is most common among women in fishing communities and certain entertainment districts. Unlike Chinese foot binding, which breaks and reshapes bones into tiny lotus feet, the Japanese version involves tight wrapping and constriction that doesn't permanently deform but definitely restricts. Women wrap their feet from ankle to toe in long strips of cotton cloth, binding them snugly enough to compress the foot and prevent the natural spreading that comes from walking barefoot or in minimal footwear. The wrapping is redone daily, tightened progressively over years, creating feet that are narrower and more delicate than they would naturally become. You watch as a young woman unwraps her feet after a day's work, and the cloth comes off in a spiral, revealing skin marked with creases and indentations from the pressure. Her feet are pale where the wrapping blocked sun exposure, slightly swollen at the ankles where circulation was restricted, and undeniably smaller than unwrapped feet would be. She massages them with obvious relief. Working feeling back into compressed flesh, then begins the process of rewrapping for the night. Even during sleep, some women maintain light wrapping to preserve the restricted shape they've cultivated. The motivation varies by context. In entertainment districts, particularly among geisha and their predecessors, small feet are considered elegant and feminine. The restricted movement that results from compressed feet creates a particular walking style. Short steps, swaying hips, a general air of delicacy that fits aesthetic preferences for fragile, flower-like femininity. These women are performing a specific type of beauty that includes their constrained decorative feet as essential elements. In fishing villages, the practice has different roots that historians still argue about. Some say wrapped feet prevent injury from shells and sharp rocks while walking on beaches. Others claim the practice spread from entertainment districts to rural areas as women adopted urban beauty standards. Still others suggest it started as a way to distinguish free women from slaves, who needed full-foot functionality for heavy labour. Probably all these factors contribute. The practice serves multiple purposes simultaneously, practical and aesthetic and social. The wrapping technique itself requires skill and practice. Too loose and the foot won't compress properly, rendering the whole effort pointless. Too tight and circulation gets dangerously restricted, leading to numbness, pain, or even tissue damage if maintained for too long. Mothers teach daughters the proper tension, the correct angle for the cloth strips, the way to wrap that achieves compression without causing injury. It's a folk skill passed down through generations, refined through trial and error over decades or centuries. Girls typically begin foot wrapping around age 6 or 7, before bones are fully hardened, but after they're old enough to tolerate the discomfort without constant complaint. The initial wrapping is relatively gentle, introducing the child to the sensation and practice without immediately pushing for dramatic compression. Over months and years, the wrapping grows tighter, and the girl's feet adapt by growing less wide than they otherwise would. It's not the extreme deformation of Chinese foot binding, but it's definitely body modification, deliberately constraining natural development to achieve a cultural ideal. The pain involved is significant, but apparently manageable for most girls who grow up with the practice. They learn to walk with wrapped feet, developing balance and gait patterns that accommodate the restriction. They know no other way of moving, so what might seem impossibly constraining to someone trying it for the first time becomes normal through familiarity. By adulthood, many women feel uncomfortable with unwrapped feet. The sensation is strange, the freedom of movement almost excessive, the appearance somehow wrong without the wrapping. Footwear adapts to wrapped feet rather than the other way around. Traditional zori sandals work reasonably well with wrapped feet. the thong fitting between the toes, the flat sole supporting compressed arches. Some women commission special sandals with narrower platforms specifically designed for their restricted feet. Others wear tabby socks, split-toe foot coverings, over their wrapping for additional support and protection. The entire lower leg wardrobe assumes wrapped feet as the default state. Men generally don't practice foot wrapping, though some performers in certain theatrical traditions adopt similar practices for specific roles requiring feminine presentation. The practice is thoroughly gendered, another way that femininity gets constructed through bodily constraint and modification. Small, restricted feet mark you as properly feminine, while large, free feet suggest masculinity or low-class status, where practicality trumps aesthetics. The class dimensions are complex. Peasant women working in rice paddies need functional feet for balance on muddy, uneven surfaces. They can't afford the mobility restriction that wrapping creates. But women from families with slightly more resources who can avoid the heaviest agricultural labour might adopt wrapping as a way to distance themselves from peasant status. It's a declaration. My feet are decorative rather than purely functional because my family's economic position allows such luxury. An amusing account describes a wrapped-foot woman who married into a family in a different region where the practice was unknown. Her new mother-in-law was horrified by the foot wrapping, convinced it was unhealthy and bizarre, and pressured her to stop. The young bride tried to comply, leaving her feet unwrapped for several weeks, but found walking so uncomfortable and her unwrapped feet so aesthetically unacceptable to her own standards that she secretly resumed wrapping at night. She hid the practice for months until her husband discovered the cloth strips and had to mediate between his wife's cultural preferences and his mother's disapproval. The compromise involved looser wrapping that satisfied neither woman but kept peace in the household. Health consequences vary depending on wrapping intensity and duration. Mild wrapping maintained into adulthood might cause no lasting damage beyond slightly narrower feet and some reduced flexibility. More aggressive wrapping can lead to chronic pain, circulation problems, and difficulty with balance in old age. Women who wrapped their feet for decades sometimes develop arthritis or nerve damage, the accumulated price of years spent constricting natural form. But these consequences emerge gradually, and young women wrapped by their mothers don't think about problems that might appear 40 years hence. The practice begins declining in the late 19th century as Western influences increase and modernization movements question traditional body modification practices. Progressive reformers argue that foot wrapping, like blackened teeth and eyebrow removal, represents backward thinking that should be abandoned for health and practicality. The government never formally bans foot wrapping. It's too minor and regional compared to Chinese foot binding, but social pressure gradually reduces its prevalence. By the early 20th century, it's largely disappeared except in the most conservative rural pockets and among elderly women who never stopped. Today, you can see evidence of historical foot wrapping practices in old photographs and written accounts, but the practice itself has vanished completely. No young Japanese woman wraps her feet for beauty or tradition. The practice joins ohaguro teeth blackening and shaved eyebrows in the category of hygiene and beauty rituals that once seemed normal, necessary and aesthetically essential, but now appear in museums as curiosities from a vanished world. As you watch the women in this coastal village moving through their daily activities with wrapped feet, you're struck by how adaptable humans are, how we learn to function within whatever constraints our cultures impose. These women aren't suffering or complaining. They're working, laughing, living their lives with feet deliberately made smaller and less functional. because their culture tells them this is beautiful, proper, and desirable. They've internalized the restrictions so thoroughly it seems natural rather than imposed. Do you remember those toilets with wooden scraping sticks? Now you've seen feet wrapped and restricted for aesthetics. Ancient Japan modifies bodies from teeth to toes, creating humans who look and move according to cultural specifications rather than biological default settings. Each practice makes sense within its context while seeming bizarre from outside, and together they demonstrate how thoroughly culture can reshape the most intimate aspects of physical existence.
The afternoon air grows heavy as you approach a small structure at the edge of the village, separated from other buildings by a careful distance marked with sacred rope and paper talismans. Inside, you hear women's voices speaking softly, and you realize you've come to what locals call the Moon Hut or Blood House, a separate dwelling where menstruating women spend their monthly cycles in isolation. What you're about to witness reveals ancient attitudes about female bodies, ritual purity and hygiene practices that combine spiritual beliefs with practical concerns in ways that seem both protective and punishing depending on your perspective. The structure is simple: rough wooden walls, a thatched roof, minimal furnishings inside. Several women of various ages occupy the space, some lying on thin mats, others sitting and working on small craft projects or preparing food over a low fire.
They're not imprisoned here. No locks or guards prevent them from leaving, but social and religious rules keep them confined as surely as physical barriers would. During menstruation, women are considered ritually impure, potentially contaminating anything they touch, and their presence in the main household would bring spiritual pollution that could anger the kami and bring misfortune to the entire family. The isolation typically lasts 5 to 7 days, covering the heaviest flow period. Women bring basic supplies, sleeping mats, a change of clothing, simple food, and settle into the temporary community of bleeding women. Mothers and daughters might share the hut, experiencing their cycles simultaneously or overlapping. Sisters, cousins, and neighbours become temporary companions in exile, and the atmosphere inside mixes discomfort with an odd sense of freedom. Here, away from male eyes and household duties, women can speak more freely, rest more completely, and exist without the constant performance that normal life requires. The hygiene practices inside the Moon Hut are practical but rudimentary. Women use folded cloth or thick paper to absorb menstrual blood, changing these materials as needed and disposing of them by burning in the hut's small fire. Some use dried moss gathered from forests, which is surprisingly absorbent and comfortable. Others rely on cotton wadding, if their families can afford it. The cloth used is typically designated menstrual cloth, kept separate from other household textiles, and washed after each cycle in water that's been spiritually purified or disposed of away from living areas. Pain management during menstruation involves herbal remedies passed down through generations. Women brew teas from mugwort, believed to ease cramps and regulate flow. Some use ginger root, chewing it raw or steeping it in hot water for its warming properties. Willow bark, the same material used for tooth cleaning, contains natural pain relievers and gets consumed as tea for particularly difficult cycles. These remedies work to varying degrees. Modern science has confirmed that many traditional menstrual herbs do contain compounds with anti-inflammatory or analgesic properties, but their effectiveness is inconsistent and depends on proper preparation and dosage. The belief system underlying menstrual isolation is complex and varies by region and religious influence. Shinto traditions emphasize purity and pollution, with blood of any kind, menstrual, wound-related or birth-related, creating a state of ritual impurity that must be managed through avoidance and purification. Buddhism adds layers about the female body being inherently impure due to its capacity for menstruation and childbirth. These religious frameworks combine with folk beliefs about menstrual blood, having dangerous power that can wilt crops, sour sake, or curse anyone who comes in contact with it. Not all communities maintain separate menstrual huts. In some areas, women simply avoid certain spaces during menstruation. They don't enter the kitchen, don't approach family altars, don't touch tools used by others. They might sleep separately within the house rather than in a completely different structure. The severity of isolation practices correlates roughly with how strictly the community interprets purity rules and how much space and resources they have for maintaining separate facilities. The social dynamics of menstrual isolation create interesting bonds between women. Young girls experiencing their first period receive guidance and support from older women in the hut, learning not just physical management techniques, but also the emotional strategies for coping with monthly exile. The hut becomes a space for intergenerational knowledge transfer about female bodies, reproduction, sexuality, and the practical realities of being a woman in this society. Things that can't be discussed openly in mixed company get shared freely here. Historians still argue about whether menstrual huts represent oppression or protection. Some see them as evidence of misogyny, women banished from normal life because their bodies are deemed disgusting and dangerous. Others note that the huts provide respite from constant labour, giving women a socially sanctioned break from cooking, cleaning, childcare, and sexual availability to husbands. The truth probably encompasses both. The practice is simultaneously restrictive and liberating depending on individual circumstances and how strictly communities enforce the rules. Men are absolutely forbidden from entering or even approaching menstrual huts. The contamination risk is considered severe for males, who might carry the pollution back to sacred spaces or everyday tools and spread the impurity to others. If a man accidentally encounters a menstruating woman outside the hut, both undergo purification rituals afterward. He might rinse with blessed water or wave sacred branches over himself, while she performs additional ablutions to atone for exposing him to a polluted state. The end of the isolation period involves purification ceremonies that mark the woman's return to normal status. She bathes thoroughly, ideally in running water from a stream rather than stagnant water that might retain pollution. She changes into completely fresh clothing that wasn't present in the menstrual hut. Some traditions require a blessing from her priest or the household head before she can resume touching sacred objects or entering certain spaces. The transition from polluted to pure isn't instantaneous. It requires active ritual work to cleanse away the contamination. Food prepared in menstrual huts is eaten only by the women there, never shared with the main household. The belief that menstrual contamination can transfer through food means everything cooked during isolation remains segregated. Women bring raw ingredients from household stores, but prepare and consume meals independently. This creates additional work. The main household cooks without these women's help, while the exiled women must manage their own meal preparation, despite cramping and fatigue. But the purity rules demand this separation. Pregnant women experience a particularly complex relationship with menstrual isolation. The cessation of menstruation signals pregnancy, releasing women from monthly exile but placing them in a different category of ritual attention. As birth approaches, they enter another form of isolation in special birth huts, where the pollution of childbirth can be contained and managed. The female body moves from one category of ritual concern to another, never quite free from special rules and restrictions based on its biological functions. An entertaining story involves a woman who hid her menstruation to avoid missing an important festival, using extra cloth padding and praying she wouldn't bleed through her outer garments. She successfully concealed her condition throughout the day, but afterward was seized with guilt about the contamination she'd potentially spread. She confessed to a priest, underwent extensive purification rituals, and had to sponsor prayers to apologize to any kami she'd offended. The story circulates as a cautionary tale about the importance of following purity rules, even when they're inconvenient. The temporary pleasure isn't worth the spiritual consequences. Modern hygiene products would revolutionize menstrual management, but in ancient Japan, women make do with cloth, paper, moss, and whatever absorbent materials they can access. They develop techniques for washing reusable cloths discreetly, drying them where family members won't see, and storing them between uses. The practical management of menstruation is a constant female concern, handled with a mixture of pragmatism and embarrassment, necessary but never acknowledged in polite conversation. As evening settles over the village and smoke rises from the menstrual hut's small fire, you see women inside preparing for another night of exile. Some look genuinely relieved to be away from household demands. Others seem frustrated by the enforced idleness and separation from their children. Most simply accept this as normal life. Monthly retreat from the household, time spent with other bleeding women, a cycle as predictable as the moon itself. In a week or less they'll return to normal life, purified and ready to resume their regular roles until the next month brings the next exile. Do you remember the elaborate incense rituals that perfumed clothing? They take on new meaning now, helping mask any lingering menstrual odour, providing olfactory proof that a woman has returned to purity after her isolation. Every hygiene practice connects to every other, creating a comprehensive system for managing bodies that are seen as simultaneously powerful and problematic, natural and in constant need of cultural management. You're standing outside a wealthy household where servants are preparing something you haven't witnessed before. A body being cleaned and dressed, not for life, but for death. The person who lived in this physical form has departed, and now the corpse requires careful attention before Buddhist funeral rites can proceed. What you're about to observe reveals how ancient Japanese hygiene practices extend beyond life itself, how the treatment of dead bodies combines practical necessity with spiritual obligation, and how families demonstrate final respect through meticulous corpse preparation that would challenge modern sensibilities about death and decay. The body lies on a wooden board in a private chamber, surrounded by family members who maintain vigil while professional corpse preparers, usually elderly women experienced in death rituals, begin their work. The first task is washing away the pollution of death, which is considered even more spiritually dangerous than menstrual blood or childbirth. The preparers wear simple white robes that will be burned or thoroughly purified after the work is complete, and they've brought buckets of water drawn fresh that morning, along with white cloths designated specifically for corpse washing. The washing begins at the head and works downward, following a prescribed sequence meant to honour the body's hierarchy. The face receives the most careful attention. The preparers gently wipe the forehead, cheeks, nose and chin, removing any discharge or residue from the dyeing process. The mouth is cleaned inside and out, a particularly unpleasant task if death came slowly with illness. The eyes, already closed by family members immediately after death, are wiped carefully around the lids. This facial cleansing restores dignity to features that may have contorted during death, preparing the person's appearance for the final viewing. Moving to the body, the preparers lift and turn the corpse to access all surfaces. Rigor mortis may have already begun setting in, making the body stiff and difficult to manipulate, but the washing must be thorough regardless. They wash the neck, arms, torso and legs, paying particular attention to areas where bodily fluids may have leaked during or after death. The genital area receives clinical, matter-of-fact cleaning. Death has rendered the body beyond modesty concerns, though the preparers work quickly here out of respect for the family watching. The water used for corpse washing is considered contaminated and must be disposed of carefully. It can't simply be thrown out anywhere. It might pollute wells, anger kami, or create lingering spiritual problems. Typically, it's poured into a specially dug hole away from living areas, which is then covered with salt and earth to neutralize the pollution. Some families have designated corpse washing disposal sites on their property, small marked areas that everyone avoids in daily activities. After washing comes dressing, and this involves very specific garments that differ from everyday clothing. The corpse is clothed in white, the colour of death and purification in Japanese tradition. White robes, white undergarments, white tabby socks, everything pristine and new if the family can afford it, or carefully washed older whites if they can't. The clothing is put on left over right, the opposite of how living people dress. This reversal marks the deceased as belonging to the world of the dead now, no longer following the conventions of the living. The preparers arranged the body in a specific position, lying on its back, hands folded across the chest or abdomen, legs straight. The head typically points north, following Buddhist tradition that Buddha died in this position. Under and around the body, families place items meant to help the deceased in the afterlife. Coins for passage, food offerings, personal items the person treasured in life. These objects will remain with the body throughout the wake and possibly be cremated or buried along with it. Scenting the corpse is crucial, especially in warm weather when decomposition begins quickly. The preparers burn incense continuously near the body. Heavy, expensive incense if the family has resources, simpler fragrances if not. Some place aromatic woods directly on the body, tucked into the white robes or positioned around the head. Camphor, known for its preservative qualities and strong smell, gets used liberally. The goal is to mask the smell of death and delay obvious decomposition for the day or several days the body will remain above ground before cremation or burial. The corpse's face receives cosmetic attention similar to living beauty practices. If the deceased was a woman who practiced ohaguro, her blackened teeth are carefully maintained or refreshed. She should meet the afterlife looking as she did in proper life. If she shaved her eyebrows, this is noted and accepted, though no further shaving occurs. Some families apply white powder to the face, creating the pale appearance associated with beauty and now with death. The effect is ghostly, appropriate for someone transitioning from human to ancestor. Buddhist monks arrive to chant sutras, and the scent of incense intensifies until the room is thick with smoke that stings your eyes and coats your throat. The chanting, the incense, the presence of the white-robed corpse create an atmosphere dense with ritual significance. Family members take turns sitting near the body, keeping vigil, ensuring the deceased isn't alone during this liminal period between death and final disposition. The practical challenges of corpse care increase with time and temperature. In winter, a body might remain relatively unchanged for several days, allowing extended wakes and travel time for distant relatives. In summer, decomposition accelerates dramatically, forcing families to expedite the funeral process. The preparers monitor the body's condition adjusting incense levels and sometimes applying additional preservative measures like suck or salt to skin surfaces showing early decay signs. Certain death circumstances create additional hygiene challenges. A person who died violently might have wounds that require cleaning and covering. Someone who died from infectious disease needs preparation that minimizes exposure to whatever killed them, though germ theory doesn't exist yet, and protections are limited to general avoidance and thorough hand-washing afterward. Drowning victims bloated with water need careful handling to prevent fluids from leaking during preparation. The emotional toll on corpse preparers is significant but rarely acknowledged. They handle death regularly, touching cold flesh, smelling decay, witnessing family grief up close. Many become emotionally hardened as a survival mechanism, treating the work clinically rather than sentimentally. Others develop their own rituals for processing the constant exposure to death. Private prayers, purification baths after each job, careful separation between their death work identity and their home life. Payment for corpse preparation varies by family wealth and relationship. Sometimes preparers are family members or close neighbours, performing this service out of obligation or affection, receiving only token payment or traded services. Professional preparers charge fees scaled to the family's resources and the complexity of the work. A peaceful death requiring standard preparation costs less than dealing with violent death or advanced decomposition. Historians still argue about whether elaborate corpse preparation represents respect for the dead or anxiety about pollution and spirits. Probably both factors intertwine. Families want to honour their deceased loved ones while also protecting themselves from the spiritual dangers associated with corpses. The careful washing, dressing and scenting serves emotional needs. The person looks peaceful and dignified. And practical ones, decay is delayed, smells are masked, and spiritual ones, proper rituals appease the dead and protect the living. The final purification happens after the body is cremated or buried. Everyone who touched the corpse, attended the funeral, or participated in death rituals must undergo cleansing. They wash their hands and mouths, change their clothes, and some traditions require them to scatter salt at the threshold before re-entering their homes. The house where the death occurred gets thoroughly cleaned and purified with salt and prayers. Life gradually returns to normal rhythms, though the family remains in mourning for prescribed periods depending on their relationship to the deceased. An unusual story describes a family so poor they couldn't afford proper corpse preparation services. They did their best with available materials, water from their well, old white cloth torn into washing rags, homegrown herbs for scenting instead of expensive incense. The result was adequate but obviously humble, and gossip circulated about the inadequate funeral. The family's social standing suffered, demonstrating that even in death, perhaps especially in death, economic inequality manifests visibly and carries social consequences. As the corpse preparation concludes and the body lies ready for its final transition, you're struck by the care involved despite the unpleasantness of the work. These preparers have touched decay, breathed death's smell, and transformed a biological reality into something culturally acceptable. They've taken a corpse, fundamentally just meat now, and turned it back into a person worthy of respect, ritual, and remembrance. It's hygiene practiced on the dead, cleanliness extended beyond life, care given to someone who can't benefit from it, but whose family desperately needs these rituals to mark the transition from living member to honoured ancestor. Do you remember all those elaborate living hygiene practices? The blackened teeth, the incense-scented clothing, the perfumed hands? They all culminate here, in death, where the body receives its final grooming before leaving the world of the living entirely. Ancient Japanese hygiene encompasses the entire life cycle, from birth's pollution through life's daily maintenance to death's ultimate purification. You've journeyed deep into ancient Japanese hygiene practices, but before this night concludes, you need to understand that these strange rituals aren't uniquely bizarre. Humans everywhere have developed equally peculiar approaches to cleanliness, beauty, and body management. You find yourself transported across oceans and centuries, glimpsing hygiene practices from other ancient cultures that would seem just as strange to Japanese eyes as blackened teeth seem to yours. The comparative view reveals universal human impulses to control, modify, and ritualize the body, even as specific practices vary wildly by culture and era. In ancient Egypt, you watch wealthy women and men apply thick kohl eyeliner made from lead and antimony, darkening their eyes in dramatic lines that extend toward their temples. The makeup isn't just decorative, it's believed to protect against eye infections and the harsh desert sun. And modern science has partly confirmed that the lead compounds stimulate immune responses around the eyes. But the application process is elaborate. The material's toxic over time, and the effect is startling. Eyes that seem enormous, alien, more divine than human. Egyptian nobles also shave their entire bodies, including their heads, then wear elaborate wigs made from human hair or plant fibres. Their natural hair is considered unclean, potentially harbouring lice and dirt, so they remove it completely and replace it with constructed alternatives they can wash and perfume separately from their bodies. Egyptian dental hygiene involves chewing sticks similar to Japanese willow twigs, but they add a paste made from crushed rock salt, mint, dried iris flowers, and pepper. The abrasive paste scrubs teeth clean but also wears down enamel over years of use, creating dental problems even as it prevents others. Some Egyptians suffer from terrible tooth abscesses despite their hygiene efforts. The desert sand that gets into everything slowly grinding their teeth to nubs. Their solution, gold tooth caps and bridges, creates the world's first cosmetic dentistry, turning dental damage into status symbols by covering destroyed teeth with precious metal. Moving to ancient Rome, you encounter bath culture taken to extremes that make Japanese bathhouses seem modest. Roman thermae are massive public complexes with multiple pools at different temperatures. Frigidarium for cold plunges, tepidarium for warm soaking, caldarium for hot immersion. But Romans don't just bathe. They have slaves scrape their oiled skin with curved metal tools called strigils, removing dirt, dead skin, and oil in sheets. The process looks violent, the scraping vigorous enough to leave skin pink and raw. The scraped-off material, called gloios, is sometimes collected and sold as medicine. People actually purchase other people's dirt and skin cells, believing they have healing properties. Roman toilet culture deserves special mention. Public latrini feature long stone benches with multiple holes, no dividers between positions, where people sit side by side conducting business while chatting casually. They wipe with sponges on sticks, called tussorium, which are rinsed in running water troughs and reused by multiple people. The lack of privacy and shared wiping implements would horrify most modern people, but Romans consider this communal elimination perfectly normal, even social. Some graffiti on latrine walls suggests people conducted business meetings there, quite literally doing business while doing their business. Roman women use lead-based face powder similar to Japanese white powder, but they add crushed ant eggs for rouge and antimony for eyebrow darkening. They remove body hair using various methods, bronze razors, pumice stones, or a caustic depilatory paste made from resin, goat bile, bat blood, and powdered viper. The mixture burns off hair but also burns skin if left on too long, requiring careful timing and brave application. Roman beauty standards demand hairless, Pale skin for elite women, just like Japan, suggesting certain aesthetic preferences transcend individual cultures. In medieval Europe, you find hygiene practices that seem simultaneously advanced and horrifying. Public bathhouses exist in many cities, serving functions similar to Japanese sento, places for washing, socializing, and sometimes sex work. But medieval people also believe that water can penetrate skin and make the body vulnerable to disease, especially during plague times. This leads to the bizarre practice of essentially not bathing for months or years, instead changing linen undergarments frequently and believing that the linen absorbs dirt and sweat from the body. Aristocrats own dozens of linen shirts, changing multiple times daily, considering this dry cleaning adequate personal hygiene. Medieval dental care involves some practices that would impress dentists and others that would make them weep. People use cloth strips to scrub teeth, along with powders made from burnt bread, sage, and salt. But they also believe toothworms cause cavities, literal worms boring into teeth, and treatments involve smoking the mouth with henbane seeds, then scraping the dead worms that allegedly fall out. The worms are probably just debris, but the belief persists for centuries. Some barber surgeons extract painful teeth, but anesthesia doesn't exist, making the procedure an ordeal of held-down screaming patients and quickly pulled teeth. Medieval European women pluck their hairlines back even more aggressively than Japanese nobles, creating foreheads that extend halfway back their skulls. They also pluck their eyebrows nearly or completely away, considering bare brows more refined. Blonde hair is prized, leading to elaborate bleaching processes involving alkaline solutions, long hours in the sun, and frequent reapplication. The chemicals damage hair terribly, but the fashion demands sacrifice. Some women wear wigs or false hairpieces to achieve proper blonde coverage, creating complicated constructions that hide their natural dark hair. In the pre-Columbian Americas, you encounter entirely different hygiene philosophies. Aztecs bathe frequently in temazcali, steam baths similar to saunas, considering cleanliness essential for physical and spiritual health. They use soap made from copalxocotl tree root, which lathers impressively and cleanses effectively. But they also practice dental modification that seems extreme, filing teeth into points or drilling holes to insert precious stones. Jade, obsidian, or turquoise inlays turned teeth into jewelry, status symbols that required painful procedures without anesthesia, but resulted in stunning decorative effects. Aztec body modification extends to intentional scarification and cranial shaping. They bind infants' heads to create elongated skulls considered beautiful and noble. The practice doesn't harm brain function but permanently reshapes the skull, marking individuals from elite families. Combined with filed and jeweled teeth, the effect is striking. Beauty standards that transform human appearance into something distinctly cultural rather than naturally human. Historians still argue about which culture's hygiene practices are most extreme, but the question itself is probably meaningless. Every culture considers its own practices normal and other cultures' habits strange. Romans thought everyone should scrape themselves with metal tools while sharing toilets. Japanese nobles thought everyone should blacken their teeth and shave their eyebrows. Medieval Europeans thought not bathing while wearing lots of linen was hygiene. All were equally convinced they had figured out the right approach to body management. The common threads across cultures are more interesting than the differences. Humans everywhere develop elaborate rituals around basic biological functions. We're universally uncomfortable with bodies in their natural states, feeling compelled to modify, perfume, reshape, and control them according to cultural specifications. We use hygiene and beauty practices to signal status. The wealthy can afford more elaborate grooming, more expensive materials. more servants to perform the work, and we judge others harshly for failing to meet our specific cultural standards, as if our particular weird practices are objectively correct while everyone else's are barbaric. As you complete this whirlwind tour of global hygiene practices, you return to ancient Japan with new perspective. Yes, blackened teeth are strange, but so are lead-painted faces in Rome, dental jewels in Mesoamerica, and deliberate non-bathing in medieval Europe. Japanese nobles wrapping their feet seems excessive until you learn about Chinese lotus feet or Aztec cranial binding. The willow twig tooth cleaning looks sophisticated compared to medieval toothworm removal. Suddenly, ancient Japanese hygiene practices seem less bizarre and more like one option among many human attempts to manage the eternal problem of having a body that sweats, bleeds, grows hair, eliminates waste, and eventually dies. Every culture invents its own solutions to universal human problems. The solutions vary dramatically but serve similar purposes: controlling dirt and odour, signalling social status, marking life transitions, managing ritual purity, pursuing beauty according to local definitions. Ancient Japanese hygiene is neither better nor worse than Egyptian, Roman, medieval, European, or Aztec approaches. It's simply different, and understanding it means recognizing that normal is always culturally specific, always constructed, always temporary. Do you remember how strange those blackened teeth seemed at the beginning? After witnessing Egyptian head shaving, Roman skin scraping, medieval dry cleaning, and Aztec tooth drilling, maybe those black teeth don't seem quite so extreme. Every culture has its peculiarities, its practices that seem bizarre to outsiders but perfectly sensible to insiders. Ancient Japan is no exception. Just one more fascinating example of human ingenuity and strangeness applied to the eternal challenge of maintaining a clean, beautiful, socially acceptable body in a world that constantly dirties it. The journey through ancient hygiene practices is drawing to a close now, and you find yourself back where you started, in Heian period Japan, watching the sun set through paper screens, the air thick with incense and the subtle rustling of silk. You've witnessed so much strangeness, so many rituals that seemed incomprehensible at first, but gradually revealed their internal logic, their cultural necessity, their human universality beneath exotic surfaces, the blackened teeth, the willow twig brushing, the rice bran cleansing, the annual hair washing, the incense-smoked clothing, the toilet sticks, the plucked eyebrows, the bathhouse communities, the perfume competitions, the buffed fingernails, the wrapped feet, the menstrual isolation, the corpse preparation. All of it swirls together now into a complete picture of how ancient people managed their bodies in a world without modern plumbing, without germ theory, without any of the conveniences you take for granted. What strikes you most powerfully in these final moments is not the strangeness, but the care. Every practice you witnessed involved meticulous attention, patient effort, and genuine concern for appearance, health, and social propriety. The aristocratic lady who spent an hour having her teeth blackened wasn't vain. She was participating in her culture's definition of beauty and respectability. The bathhouse workers scrubbing customers vigorously weren't being cruel. They were providing a valued service that made people feel clean and renewed. The corpse preparers washing dead bodies weren't morbid. They were showing final respect and helping families navigate grief through ritual action. Ancient people weren't ignorant about hygiene. They simply worked with different knowledge frameworks and different available materials. They observed what worked and what didn't, developing practices that often had genuine benefits, even if the explanations were wrong. The willow twig's natural salicylic acid really does help oral health, even if users didn't know about chemical compounds. The rice bran powder genuinely exfoliates and brightens skin, even if nobody understood why. The incense smoke actually repels insects and inhibits bacterial growth, even if people attributed the effects to spiritual rather than chemical properties. You realise that hygiene has always been cultural performance as much as practical necessity. Yes, people need to remove dirt and manage odours, but how they do it, when they do it, and what it means go far beyond simple cleanliness. The elaborate grooming rituals you witnessed created social hierarchies, marked life transitions, demonstrated wealth and leisure, and reinforced gender roles. Hygiene wasn't just about being clean, it was about being the right kind of person, belonging to the right social category, displaying appropriate values through body management. The economic dimensions become clearer too. Every hygiene practice required resources, materials, tools, time, knowledge, and often servants' labour. The wealthy could afford elaborate rituals that mark them as distinct from commoners who made do with simpler methods. But this wasn't just conspicuous consumption. It was a system where appearance genuinely affected opportunities. The woman with perfectly blackened teeth and buffed nails attracted better marriage prospects. The man with expensive perfumes gained access to elite social circles. Beauty and hygiene practices were investments with tangible returns, not mere vanity. The gendered nature of many practices also stands out more clearly now. Women bore disproportionate burdens. They endured more painful procedures, spent more time on grooming, faced harsher social consequences for hygiene failures. Their bodies were scrutinized, modified, and controlled more intensely than men's bodies. Yet some practices, like menstrual isolation, also provided breaks from labour and spaces for female community. The relationship between hygiene practices and women's autonomy is complex, neither simply oppressive nor simply liberating, but somewhere in between, varying by individual circumstances and specific practices. Historians still argue about many aspects of ancient hygiene. Did practices originate domestically or arrive from continental Asia? Were they primarily about health, beauty, or spiritual purity? Did they change over time in response to new ideas or remain relatively stable for centuries? The historical record is incomplete, frustratingly vague on many details you'd love to know. But enough evidence exists to reconstruct these practices with reasonable confidence to understand what people did, even if we can't always be certain why they did it. What would ancient Japanese people think of modern hygiene practices? They'd probably find daily showers wasteful and weakening. The idea of brushing teeth multiple times daily with synthetic bristles and chemical paste would seem excessive. Deodorants and antiperspirants that stop natural sweating might horrify them. Sweat is the body eliminating impurities. Why would you want to prevent that? They'd likely find modern minimal clothing scandalous, the exposure of skin to sun and dirt inviting illness. Your casual attitude toward ritual purity would seem spiritually dangerous, but they'd probably appreciate hot running water once they tried it. The convenience of flush toilets would be immediately appealing. They'd recognize toothbrushes as improved versions of their willow twigs. And they'd understand the impulse behind modern cosmetics. Humans have always tried to enhance appearance and mask imperfections. Only the specific methods have changed. The underlying drives remain constant across centuries and cultures. As darkness settles completely and servants light lanterns throughout the household, you watch the evening hygiene rituals begin again. An attendant prepares willow twigs for tomorrow's mouth cleansing. Another lays out rice bran pouches for dry cleansing. Someone is refreshing the incense in clothing storage chests, ensuring tomorrow's garments will smell appropriately elegant. A woman reapplies her blackened teeth coating before sleep. Children are being scrubbed clean and prepared for bed. Life continues with its rhythms of cleaning, perfuming, maintaining, and caring for bodies that constantly need attention. You understand now that ancient hygiene wasn't primitive or foolish. It was simply different, adapted to different circumstances and knowledge systems. The practices served their purposes within their contexts. People felt clean by their standards, beautiful by their definitions, properly maintained according to their values. They would pity you for not knowing how to properly blacken teeth or smoke clothing with agar wood, just as you might pity them for not having toothpaste or showers. Each culture believes its hygiene practices are obviously correct and others are strange, which tells you more about human psychology than about objective cleanliness standards. The strangest realization might be this: your own hygiene practices, the ones that seem so normal and natural to you, would appear equally bizarre to people from other times and places. Your descendants might look back on daily chemical-laden showers with the same bemused confusion you felt watching teeth being blackened. What seems like obvious, correct hygiene now might someday seem as quaint and peculiar as willow twig toothbrushing seems to you. Nothing is permanent, not even the basic ways we clean our bodies. As you prepare to leave this world of ancient Japanese hygiene, you carry with you not just knowledge of strange practices, but a deeper understanding of human universality beneath cultural difference. We all have bodies that need managing. We all develop elaborate rituals around basic functions. We all judge each other based on adherence to arbitrary standards. We all believe our way is the right way while everyone else is doing it wrong. Ancient Japan is a mirror showing you truths about all human societies, including your own. The incense smoke curls upward through lamplight, carrying its complex fragrance into the night air. The household settles into evening quiet, clean by ancient standards, beautiful according to their rare aesthetics, prepared for tomorrow's repetition of eternal hygiene cycles. Bodies will dirty again, require cleaning again, need grooming again, in endless loops that continue as long as humans live in physical form. The methods change, but the necessity remains constant, connecting you across centuries to these ancient people who faced the same fundamental challenge: how to live comfortably in a body that constantly requires maintenance. Underscore, 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 underscore. And so your journey through ancient Japanese hygiene comes to its gentle end, settling like incense smoke finding rest after rising through still air. You've travelled from blackened teeth to wrapped feet, from toilet sticks to corpse preparation, witnessing strangeness that gradually became familiar, bizarre practices that revealed their logic and purpose when viewed with patience and open curiosity. The paper screens filter moonlight now, soft and forgiving, casting everything in gentle shadows where details blur and distinctions fade. The household sleeps, bodies clean by ancient standards, resting after a day of elaborate grooming rituals you understand now weren't vanity but necessity, weren't foolishness but wisdom adapted to different circumstances and knowledge. Outside, the garden releases night fragrances, flowers opening in darkness, earth cooling from day's warmth, the faint smoke smell from distant bathhouse fires burning low, These scents would comfort ancient people, familiar markers of their world, just as your world has its own olfactory signatures that future people might find equally strange and somehow perfect. Your breathing slows to match the household's sleeping rhythm. The strange hygiene practices that startled you hours ago now seem like old friends, understandable choices made by people who were fundamentally like you, worried about appearance, concerned with cleanliness, trying to manage bodies that constantly need attention in a world that offers limited solutions. Let the blackened teeth fade from your thoughts. Let the willow twigs and rice bran dissolve into comfortable darkness. Let the incense smoke carry away all the strangeness until only soft understanding remains. Ancient people cleaned themselves as best they could with what they had, just as you do, just as humans always have and always will. The night deepens. Your body relaxes completely. The ancient world releases you gently back to your own time, carrying with you only the peaceful knowledge that humans everywhere, across all times, simply do their best with bodies that need constant care. Sleep comes easily now, soft as silk, dark as properly blackened teeth, peaceful as an aristocrat resting after an hour of patient grooming. Rest well in your own time, your own body, your own version of clean. End of script. Sweet dreams.